Dallas, Texas in 1963 was just an entirely different time and place. There were still white and colored restrooms in public buildings and drinking fountains. It was very conservative, arch conservative. The Adlai Stevenson, ambassador to the United Nations, had actually been attacked and spit on by an angry crowd in Dallas. They were upset over the United Nations. It was a hotbed of right-wing activity.
James Lee Woodard walked out last week of a Texas prison after 27 years behind bars. The state agrees that Mr. Woodard was wrongfully convicted in 1981. He was convicted of killing a girl that he'd been dating, and now he's part of a pattern. Woodard is the 17th man from Dallas alone, the 17th to be exonerated by DNA evidence, and nearly all those freed are African Americans. As NPR's Wade Goodwin reports, the district attorney's office is predicting that Woodard is not going to be the last inmate exonerated.
One of the most significant moments in Dallas history could happen later on this week. So what's happening here? County commissioners are expected to exonerate a man who was convicted and then executed for a murder the county now says, 70 years later, that he did not commit. Our J.D. Miles tonight looking back at the case and how a broken justice system could have led to such a shameful chapter of our history.
Looking into his eyes on this film from inside a Dallas courtroom, you can only imagine what was going through the mind of Tommy Lee Walker. His unbroken stare into the camera appears to look for reason and fairness that too often didn't exist in 1956.
The said warden is hereby directed and commanded to pass and cause to be passed through the body of you, Tommy Lee Walker, a current of electricity of sufficient intensity to cause the death of you, Tommy Lee Walker.
A judge sentenced the 21-year-old to death in the electric chair for a murder that overwhelming evidence shows he didn't commit.
It's not difficult to fathom probably what happened. They grabbed the first, quote, Negro, they saw.
Dallas County Commissioner John Wiley Price says that period in the city's history was scarred by racial injustice. It was in this part of northwest Dallas near Love Field in 1953 when a 31-year-old woman was murdered at night while walking to a bus stop. There were no witnesses, no evidence left behind, just racial hysteria and unfounded claims that it was committed by a black man.
The Klan was basically rampant here.
Tommy Lee Walker lived across town from the murder scene near a park close to Baylor Hospital. He was among countless young black men rounded up for questioning, with some in the white community demanding justice, even at the cost of arresting the wrong man.
And that's kind of what happened here, I guess.
Yeah, from all the evidence that has come to light, that's exactly what happened. And I guess, the real travesty of this is that Tommy had an alibi.
9 people confirmed Walker's alibi that on the night of the murder, he was with his pregnant girlfriend, who gave birth to their son the next day.
Now, do you have anything to say why the sentence of law should not be pronounced against you?
Still, he was arrested 4 months after the crime. He says after hours of threats and promises, he was coerced into giving a false confession that he immediately tried to recant. He professed his innocence to the judge after he was convicted and sentenced to death by an all-white jury.
I feel that I have been tricked out of my life. There's a lot of other people that have been convicted for crime that committed and was turned loose. I haven't did anything, and I'm not being turned loose. I think Dallas has made a start, and this means that there is a challenge to keep moving.
This is News 8 video of Dr. Martin Luther King in Dallas in 1963. He talked about school integration.
However, one has to honestly and realistically admit that there is much to be desired and much to be done.
When Dr. King visited the city, it was considered one of the most racist in the country. The Ku Klux Klan had the largest chapter in the nation.
You've still got Negro Day at the fair. You've got Klan Day at the fair.
Dr. King was not welcomed in Dallas, even by black pastors who did not allow him to preach in their churches. So he spoke at Fair Park. Peter Johnson, who was friends with Dr. King, says the pastors didn't want to upset the white establishment.
It hurt his feelings. It literally hurt his feelings.
It all happened with the armed robbery of this Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant in Greenville, Texas, on August 9, 1982, by a young black male. The detective investigating was Lieutenant James Fortenberry of the Greenville Police. By his own admission, he was hurting for leads. So he had the local paper appeal to anyone who'd seen any strange vehicles in the vicinity of the restaurant to contact him. Fortenberry got a call from a white woman who lived across the road from this park in Greenville. She said she'd seen a black man park his car, roughly where our car is parked, park it there a number of times. She became suspicious. The car had South Carolina license plates. Now this park is some distance from the robbery, a good 3.5 miles. Fortenberry considered this a major lead. He traced the license plate, and the car turned out to be owned by Lenel Jeter.
Well, that's my favorite reading place and place of meditating. It is a public park, and I usually go there and relax and feed the ducks because it's near the water and it's comfortable. But must I be suspicious because I go to a public park and read? That doesn't make any sense.
Fortenberry not only considered Jeter a suspect in the Kentucky Fried Chicken robbery in Greenville, but he called the police in Plano, Texas, to tell them he might have a suspect for a similar robbery there. The Plano police told the police in Garland, Texas, that Jeter might be a suspect for a robbery there. Well, suddenly, Jeter's picture was being circulated as a suspect in robberies all over the Dallas region.
Whatever started the investigation, once Lenel Jeter's photograph began showing up in lineups, he began to be identified.
Why are you telling us this? Because that motherfucker, Kennedy, stole that motherfucking election. That's why. Nixon was going to be one of the great presidents till Kennedy wrecked this country. Got niggas all over the place asking for their damn rights. Why do you think we got all this crime now? He promised those motherfuckers too goddamn much, you ask me. The revolution's coming. Bullshit, man. Fascism is coming back. I'm going to tell you this. The day that communist son of a bitch died was a great day for this country.
And the only thing else I got to say is, how about them Cowboys?
Thank you. Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the global system of white supremacy. Today's date, Tuesday, March 31, 2026. So I have been told. We should be here on Thursday, neutralizing workplace racism, and then again on Friday, Dr. Collin Anthony Beckles reading Dangerous Activity. We've heard that a few times. Anyway, Dr. Collin Anthony Beckles' dissertation, Pan-African Sites of Resistance, normal times, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, even chatted up guest coming this year weekend, April 4, important for our discussion today as well, April 4. But more on that later. The intro that we used for today's broadcast, and again, generally, we have original intros. Hit it, quit it. Play it one time, never hear it again. I say, oh my gosh, Anyway, so the intro for today started off with Jim Marrs. He's written a number of books on the Kennedy assassination and raising questions about the official narrative that we were told for years. Lone nut Lee Harvey Oswald did all of this, and he did a documentary some years back, like 10 years ago, even though he's been writing books and talking about this for decades. But he did a talk some years back, and the very beginning of his deep discussion into declassified CIA documents and, what information have they fooled us and lied to us about Oswald and Jack Ruby and how John Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, to begin all of that, to provide context, if you will. Mr. Marrs starts with, now Dallas at that time was really segregated, separate washrooms and water fountains for the niggras, and and Adlai Stevenson being assaulted and spit on. When he came to it, that's the context that he starts with to provide what he would say is an accurate understanding of the Kennedy assassination. Even used that term right wing. That's about the only thing I would say. Terms are very important that tripped me up for a long time, confused me. Right wing does not make sense. It is not the most accurate term, and frequently one of the ways that white people practice racism. We don't use the word racism. Certainly we don't call no white person racist, so we'll say they're an ultra-conservative, extremist, prejudice, right-wing, anything but they are a racist, white supremacist. But anyway, that's how Mr. Marrs starts for context. Then we heard a little bit of Dixie. That is important. Anytime we have a guest who writes a book where that song is mentioned, I feel obligated to play it. We've heard it dozens of times over the years. So we heard a teeny bit of Dixie, and then we moved to privileged black male number one, James Lee Woodard. We spent 27 years in greater confinement. Say he killed his white girlfriend. You heard the bell there. And then found out that he did not do this. And they said, well, this might be the first, but he is not going to be the last. Mr. Woodard, we got bunches and bunches. They said, we got a pattern. Dr. Wellesley, she said, that's what you're supposed to do. Pattern recognition. Man, we got bunches. We almost at 24. And it's black dudes, privileged black dudes, like Mr. Woodard. All these convictions, and then nope, didn't do that. So the first one was Mr. Woodard, and the second one, privileged black male, Tommy Lee Walker, executed at the age of 21, arrested at the age of 19, and then find out, whoops, 70 years later, he gets exonerated. Where you heard his own testimony directly from Mr. Walker, barely even Mr. I mean, he was arrested at 19, so, and him saying, I feel like I've been tricked out of my life. True. 70 years to, whoops, we shouldn't have done that. At least he did get to live a little bit longer than George Stinney. South Carolina connection in there too, but he got to live a little bit longer, if that means anything. Then we heard Dr. King, one of his several visits to Dallas in 1963. That's important for a number of reasons, because I did mention that fella, President Kennedy, and what happened to him in Dallas in 1963. And hey, I mean, they did have that House Select Committee on Assassinations. There are a number of people who say these two murders, King, Kennedy, are related. So I guess now I've given you three to say these are all related. Lumumba, Kennedy, King. Some even saying Looks like some of the same white people were involved in all three of these. Yep. Anywho, so we heard Dr. King's visit to Dallas, him talking about more work to do, and apparently things were so bad in Dallas, the black preachers, you can't come up and, no. We got lots of appreciation for what you're doing, Brother King, but we can't upset the good white people of Dallas. No. Even that is massive context. For Kennedy being assassinated in 1963, how bad is it? Black preachers turned Dr. King away and said explicitly, we can't upset white people. Wow. And then we heard different privileged black male, Lenel Jeter, who actually is so privileged he got his own movie that you can check. I guess he's super duper privileged. He got a movie and he got a massive 30-minute segment on 60 Minutes. So super privileged. Lenel Jeter, engineer. I mean, reading is dangerous, and you might get locked up for the rest of your life. He said, I like to go out and read at the park and feed the ducks. What was he reading, Brother Gus? He was reading Anarchist Cookbook, maybe. He was reading some sort of revolutionary Black Panther literature and something. He was reading the Bible and feeding the ducks. And a white woman saw him and said, suspicious. I bet he's been looting the fried chicken store and is using the ducks and the Bible as cover. I'm going to call the police. And they convicted him for life. And even I had to go back and listen a few times. Did I hear that correctly? Tommy Lee Walker had 9 alibi witnesses to say, hey, wait a minute. Tommy didn't do this. He was over here. He couldn't have been killing no white person. Lenel Jeter had 9 alibi witnesses to say, hey, Lenel was at work at the time that the fried chicken place was being robbed. He didn't do it. 9. And he still got convicted. Life. Thankfully, he did get released, but woo, these 3 black males all connected to one of the folks who pops up in this book and the Kennedy assassination and even why we had to hear Dixie at the beginning of the broadcast. You also heard a quickie from JFK and some of the folks who were not pleased or not sad about Kennedy being killed. There was quite a bit of that sentiment in places like Dallas. Not just Dallas, but places like Dallas. Yes. I mentioned the name Lumumba. Just days ago, white Belgian official, 93 years old, they are dragging him out of his bed wheelchair to prosecute him for the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. You can go and watch projects, read books. They will talk about John F. Kennedy's Welcome to the White House. January 1961 is, congratulations, new president, Mr. Kennedy. Hope you're going to have a great term. First things up, we killed that nigger, Patrice Lumumba, in the Congo. Literally, that's one of the first things that he learns going to the White House. Oh my God, what? Omen, what they call foreshadowing, what I told you. Some of the same white people involved in that murder, involved in the Kennedy assassination. Anyway, while researching all of this and how important it is to understand the local system of white supremacy in Dallas, Texas, where John F. Kennedy was assassinated, where they lock up black dudes like Mr. Woodard and Mr. Walker and Mr. Jeter and bunches other for reading and talking to the waterfowl. I found whole books. They examine the context of white supremacy racism in Dallas and how that's connected to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. we will chat it up about one of them today. That their book, White Metropolis, Race, Ethnicity, and Religion in Dallas, 1841 to 2001. You'll notice 1963, right smack dab in the middle. In addition to authoring this here text, our guest is a scholar of Texas race relations, my favorite term, racism, and right-wing extremism. That term again. He has taught at Collin College and worked at SMU's Clements Center for Southwestern Studies. We are looking forward chatting it up about this here book and what it all means. Even super excited to see what the response was from white Dallasites, maybe white people in Texas in general. Super glad to have him hanging out with us on the broadcast. Joining us live, our guest, Mr. Michael Phillips. Mr. Phillips, you with us, sir?
Hi, how are you doing?
We are hanging in. Glad to have you with us on the broadcast. For, I guess, our listening audience, this might be their first time hearing about your work. Anything briefly you would like to share about who you are and the work you do, sir?
Yeah, I've focused on basically the history of racism and also the history of how we define racial groups in America. And one of the key ideas in the book is this. Quite some time ago, I think most people understood that all these racial categories have no meaning biologically at all. That these are random categories that were created when the Europeans began to conquer North and South America, when they began to enslave Africans, and it served the purpose of justifying genocide and enslavement. But there's no real significant biological difference between people who are categorized as white, black, or whatever. Now, one thing that most people may not know is that the categories themselves change over time. And so one of the things I found in Dallas, and this is true in all of American history and much of the Western world, that the category or the people who fit into the category of white changes over time based on what's politically convenient at the moment. So there are millions of people today who would just be accepted as white people, who were not accepted as white at different periods of American history. So, for instance, Ben Franklin at one point in the 1750s is complaining that German immigrants are taking jobs from white people. The Irish at one point, when we're talking about the 13 colonies that became the United States, the people who dominate those colonies are of British descent. The British saw the Irish as racially different and as racially inferior. And you look at the cartoons in the 1830s and 1840s when there was big Irish immigration, they're portrayed as ape-like. They're compared to African Americans. They're described as inferior. They're given jobs like African Americans. So that's another group. Italians, Jewish people are not accepted as white until they serve a particular function in promoting white dominance. And for instance, the Irish end up, serving in police departments. They become an important part of the Democratic Party when it was dominated by segregation. It's first pro-slavery people, then segregationists. They buy their entry into whiteness by buying into anti-blackness. This is the story of every immigrant group that comes from Europe. Anti-blackness is the ticket to whiteness. And this is how it works in Dallas. And so in my book, I look at two particular groups that have two very different experiences in terms of whiteness. One is the Mexican-American population, and the other is the Jewish population in Dallas. And they are able to win tenuous, temporary acceptance as white based on their economic class, based on their attitudes towards African American civil rights, based on their politics, and how light their skin is, and how they assimilate to the demands of the Western European dominant class. And so we see, for instance, the Jewish population in Dallas. They come here.
Hang on a second, Mr. Phillips, before we get into all that, because I have specific questions, so I kind of have a roadmap before we just hop into the book here. Before we get into all of that, for our listeners who've not seen you, one, you are classified as a white man. Is that true?
That's true. Yeah, a lot of my ancestors were Sicilian, and I have some French ancestors as well, and a small slice from the British Isles. That's where the name Phillips came from.
Fascinating. And just or I guess, make sure I get this one easy, yes or no. Certainly, given everything that you shared with us in the introduction and this book, you've got other projects, you are classified as a white man, and you are informed about racism, white supremacy, what it is, how it works. That's true, yes?
I would say yes, yes.
Right on. Thank you for the answer. And definitions. I'm so appreciating your text, sir. You take time, and you were doing some of that right now. That's why I said, pause, slow down, so we can put a little context with this here. You take time in White Metropolis to explain exactly what you were telling us. What does it mean to be classified as white? And then how that evolves over time. Individuals classified as white, they do the choosing. Even reminded me, you reference his work in the book. We had Ian Hani Lopez as a guest on the program, White by Law. Fabulous work. But definitions, also, we have great respect for that on this broadcast. The word racism and the term white supremacy, I use those as synonyms. I use the same definition for both terms. That definition, a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you think such a system exists? Do you think that definition is accurate?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If I could real briefly, I'll just say there are incentives provided for people to accept white supremacy and to accept the domination of the wealthiest white elites who are of Western, Northern European descent. And sometimes these incentives are purely symbolic, or that basically you're considered part of the racial ruling class. Sometimes they're more substantive, like, for instance, you're less likely to be pulled over by the police. If you encounter the police, you're more likely to not be shot to death. You might experience higher wages. In the era of segregation, you get to sit wherever you want to on a bus or in the theater. Sometimes you get to the proximity of the inner circle, the most wealthy elites, if you buy into white supremacy. And this is what W.E.B. Du Bois actually was the first person to use this phrase. He talked about the wages of whiteness. There is a wage attached to being assigned a white identity. And the wages vary. And some people are poorly compensated for that, but they're not. The one thing they avoid is being cast at the very bottom of the social ladder. So even the poorest white can say that. There's an ascending scale. And here's the key, though, that I think is really key to understanding Dallas and understanding American politics. You can gain whiteness, but you can lose it. So if I can real quickly mention, like, for instance, Jewish people in Dallas. They generally are accepted as sort of white, not quite white, off-white. They have a, there's a thing in Dallas where there's an obsession with end times religion. And a lot of Protestants think that the that Israel's going to play a key role in the second coming of Jesus. And so there's this reverence, that comes with the association of Jewish people with the Bible, the heroes of the Bible. In Dallas, Jewish people own the department stores, which, by the way, are segregated. And that economic position gives them proximity to whiteness. However, on the other hand, there are working class Jewish people and Jewish people in unions. And so when there's a big strike in Dallas of garment workers in the 1930s, a union called the International Lady Garment Workers Union sends an organizer named Meyer Pearlstein, and he's there to organize these garment workers. Some of them are Jewish, some of them are Italian immigrants, some of them are poor whites, and so on. When that happens, the Dallas Morning News has a headline, one issue where it says, Russian-born Jew comes to Dallas. And so they imply he's communist, they imply he's an alien, and there's a suggestion there's something not quite white about him. And there's even SMU English professor, the chair of the English department in the 1950s, who publishes a book that's probably the best-selling book of Holocaust denial in history, called Iron Curtain Over America, where he says the people we call Jews today aren't really the Jews of the Bible. They're an Asian tribe. They caused the Russian Revolution, and they've taken over the Democratic Party, and they're trying to turn America communist. And they concocted this story of the Holocaust in order to blackmail Germany into paying reparations, and the Holocaust never happened, so on. This is the 1950s.
I'm going to pause you right there, Mr. Phillips, because you have moved greatly from, I just asked you about my definition. I am going to request if you could answer my question without going way far off tangent. I will just clarify for this broadcast, your book is titled White Metropolis. It's not Jewish Metropolis. Yeah. It's not Jew Metropolis. I am very interested in focusing on white power and people classified as white in Dallas. So that's what's going to be my focus. Yeah. So I'm going to have questions that are specifically focused on that. I'm going to hop in if you start, especially if you deviate way far from my question, because I really didn't ask you about the history of Jewish people in Dallas. I just asked about my definition. We got accurate. Yes. Yeah. Bang. Now I can move forward. Specifically with this here book, White Metropolis, who was the audience for this book? Was this like a book that students at maybe UT were supposed to read, sociology, history students? Was this an everybody that you just lay folks, anyone in Texas or interested in Dallas history was supposed to read? Like, who did you envision was supposed to sit down with White Metropolis?
Well, I'll just say people who have read it. I've spoken to probably close to 100 different audiences since the book came out 20 years ago. And it's been, I intended my audience to be black, white, Latinx, and so on, because I think that people need to understand how racism works and the incentives that are provided for racism and why people stay loyal to it, even though it doesn't benefit but substantially, but a very small group of people. So general audience.
Fascinating. Okay, wide audience. And then specifically, I guess my first question would be, they say, hey, man, sometimes the cover doesn't tell you everything or what have you. This cover, especially, so it's White Metropolis, Race, Ethnicity, and Religion in Dallas, 1841 to 2001. But then you've got a picture of this black dude, and he's got the trolley car behind him leaving Dallas. Why did you choose that for the cover art for White Metropolis?
I thought it was a good metaphor for the fantasy of what Dallas elites thought Dallas was. Dallas was built by black people. Dallas derived its original wealth from slavery. Dallas, became a city of bankers who profited largely from the system of sharecropping. Dallas had African Americans they used as a surplus labor force to keep on the margins, to drive down the wages of everyone else, and then use as strike breakers. And African Americans, because they were desperate for employment, sometimes were kind of forced into that role. And so Dallas is, in really a substantial way, a black city. So I meant the title as ironic that Dallas wasn't a white city. And the fantasy is they wanted black people there to work, and then the elites wanted black people to leave the neighborhoods once their work was done. It was sort of a commentary like, the concept of the sundown town. And so black people would work for white people, and then they're expected to leave those white spaces and go back to their segregated zones.
It works beautifully that way. When you answer my question, you just walk me beautifully to my next question, Mr. Phillips. Woo! One of my top 10, really, top 5, top 3 most constructive books that I have read relating to racism, white supremacy. I'm so thankful we read it on the Catherine Massey Book Club. James Lowen's Sundown Towns, A Hidden Dimension of American Racism, even though I don't think that is an accurate term, racially restricted region. But, oh man, Dallas pops up in that book so many times. And for what he just said, mostly, passage 1, I picked out a few of them just to give us a little context here. Lowen writes, white suburbs still pass all sorts of ordinances to discourage non-white visitors and residents. Highland Park, Texas, has been a leader in criminalizing ordinary behavior. It may have more no signs per capita than any other city in the nation. The Dallas suburb that's my word, brags about being a city of parks, but it does not want outsiders to use them. Lakeside Park is its largest park and continues into Dallas. Highland Park has made it illegal to eat lunch in its portion of Lakeside. Too much litter, said city officials. But the Dallas Morning News dealies suspected that an aversion to the possibility of African American picnickers underlay the ordinance. Highland Park also prohibits swimming, wading, climbing trees, drinking alcohol, sleeping, protractedly lounging, and sitting on railings or any other property in a park which is not designated or customarily used for such purposes. Outsiders cannot play tennis. Reservations are for residents only, and it is illegal to play without. In 1982, the suburb made headlines for ticketing 13 joggers, 10 of whom were non-residents, for jogging on city streets. This offense cost a $15 fine or a night in jail. It made fishing without a city permit against the law and charged $5 per year for a fishing permit. Highland Park police have also repeatedly arrested African Americans and Mexican Americans for being drunk in car. The latter is a non-existent crime, according to reporter Jane Wolfe. The fishing permit is legal nonsense too, because a Texas fishing license, which costs $450 a year for state residents, entitles the holder to fish free of charge in any body of public water in Texas. I will stop there, but woo, I'm so glad we read this book before I got to our book today, White Metropolis. Man, it sounds like you'd already read Sundown Towns, James Lowen. Did I make an assumption incorrectly?
I'm familiar with Lowen's work, and I will note, your listeners may not know, Highland Park is completely surrounded by Dallas. And they incorporated to have a separate school system. They have a separate police department, but they still benefit from the outside capital that comes into Dallas as a whole. No one knows what Highland Park is, but they know what Dallas is. So they benefit from being surrounded by Dallas, but they don't pay in to the schools. They don't pay into the police services. They have a lot of the utility hookups or Dallas hookups. So people in Dallas, to a large degree, subsidize the very wealthy people and the almost entirely white population of Highland Park and also University Park, which is right next to it, which is another, little, I call them inburbs. They're not even suburbs. They're inburbs. They're inside the city, surrounded by the city.
Mr. Lowen does, that's why it's in my top 3. He does take the time to point out that geography, that they are surrounded by Dallas and oh man, I had that later, but that is such a critical component of what really the global system of white supremacy, racism. White people are the greatest moochers in the galaxy, whichever term you want to put on, but oh my God, even in fact, that what he just said right there, the white people, they go and deliberately set up a racially restricted region. Can't be no niggers here. We put all these wacky ordinances where you can't even jog on our street if you don't live here. So we're going to keep all the non-white people out. And then they go and, well, we're going to steal our water from the city of Dallas and all that, so we don't have to pay no taxes. Make sure we don't live in Dallas so we don't have to pay no taxes. The epitome of this, Mr. Dallas himself, there is nothing Dallas about the Dallas Cowboys except the name.
Yeah.
They play in Arlington.
Yeah.
The training facility is in Frisco. Frisco, I think, is a racially restricted region, but these are places where they didn't even allow black. The only thing Dallas, and the same thing, they have to pay all these goofy taxes and what have you if they were in the city. Total system set up like that. We're not going to pay our taxes, and then we aggressively go after black people for every nickel, dime. Anyway, I had that later on, but the total system is set up exactly like that. No better example than the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones, who doesn't hire black coaches either. Now, back to the book, White Metropolis. Man, I opened this here book, and it starts with a bevy of images, and I'm flipping through like, that's interesting. Most people don't kick their book off with just all these pictures, so I'm going through. Some of these names didn't mean as much to me at the beginning as they would later once we got into it and all that. So I'm looking like, they got the cartoon strip, which didn't mean as much to me at the time till we got to the book. And I'm scrolling through and it's Looney Tunes. Whoa. And then the Looney Tunes is next to the picture of a black male being lynched. And what was the thought process about I'm gonna put all these images, not disperse them throughout the text. I'm gonna hit them right at the beginning so they get the Looney Tunes, the lynching. This is Dallas history. What was the thought process behind that, Mr. Phillips?
I wanted to maximize the shock value, because I think that draws people in. I will say, that was a decision between me and also the University of Texas Press, which published it. But one of the things I tried to do with the picture is suggest that white supremacist ideas are woven in the fabric of every aspect of Dallas culture. The geography, the housing, the music people listen to, the supposedly objective press, what they heard in sermons at the churches, that you are being given a curriculum in racism 24/7. Where the streets were, how the streets were lined up, what neighborhoods got road repairs, water connections, sewer connections. And, like one of the things I say is, if you drive through Dallas and you go to a black neighborhood and the city has allowed the streets to fall apart and there are no sewer connections and the houses aren't, they don't have access capital-wise to repair the houses and the city doesn't enforce ordinances, then someone driving by and they see black people living there, they'll associate black people with decay and with urban malaise and with disease and with filth. And that was intentional. That was propaganda as city policy. Just their sanitation policies were designed to reinforce racist ideas. And I hope the pictures help reinforce that. And I think one of the more important policies, and this is sort of what I was getting at when I was talking about Jewish people. Why do white people buy into this when they don't benefit? And there's a picture there of a white slum, and someone has a whites only sign attached to his house that's falling apart. He believed he was getting some kind of wage for his white identity, even though objectively he was living in poverty, and he was, in all due fairness, he was disenfranchised too in a different way than the African American population, but he was still politically insignificant in the minds of elites.
Unless my memory is bad, I think someone just told, we got Aunt your mom in there too. Unless my memory is bad, someone just told us that even the white person on the lowest rung is still better than a black person. And that says a lot right there. And also, I did want to add too that even that, in terms of what you just said, and logically that makes sense in terms of the structuring. We don't have sanitation for the black people, or proper sidewalks or streets or anything, really, water, nothing. And so you see all this dilapidated housing and whatnot. Oh my God, you blame it on the black people. But that doesn't even get at the totality, because Lenel Jeter, that black male, he had an engineering degree. He had a job. Right. He was reading the Bible and feeding the ducks. He was not slumming. Right. He was not peddling drugs. He was Dr. King as well. Not a drug dealer, not a thug, not a hoodlum. Mr. Jeter, he wasn't even talking about racism. He was just feeding the ducks. Even then, you are a threat. And matter of fact, Mr. Ward, who we had, Henry Wade, prosecutor, who we haven't got to yet, but he told the prosecutors, white, that he trained, he didn't tell them don't get black people because they're dumb, blah, blah, blah. He said don't get any of them. I don't care if they have money, if they're well-to-do, if they're educated. Don't get black people on the jury. And I think that's very important, because it's beyond just we need to see black people as poor and dumb and blah, blah, blah. If they weren't poor, in fact, that might even be more of a threat. You said that at the Negro World Fair, when they went to the Negro World Fair and they saw images of black people who did not look like, that was even more of a problem. Like, whoa, we got to take this down. We got to take, I'm hopping ahead, but am I being truthful?
Yeah, there was at the State Fair in 1936, it was a celebration of the 100th year of the Texas Revolution. They had a Hall of Negro Life, which is the only building torn down after that centennial celebration. And there's an account of a white woman who went in, and she saw all these statistics on the wall, and indicating increase in black wealth and black inventors and black scientists and so on. And she reportedly screamed, I won't use the language she used, but she said basically N-words, couldn't do this, can't do this. And she ran out of the hall. And I mean, that's the issue when you're talking about people like Lenel Jeter and other African Americans who were targeted, for instance, by Henry Wade's district attorney office, that they disproved white supremacy. They disproved the central thesis. And so it was essential to crush them. And again, white people, who are poor or struggling or whatever, want to be told that they are permanently in a superior caste. The poorest of them is better off than the most well-off, most affluent, most educated black person. And I tell a story about a black neighborhood in Dallas, in White Metropolis, called State Thomas. And that's exactly the kind of middle-class African-American neighborhood that Booker T. Washington was always talking about. If we're allowed to thrive, these are black teachers, black principals, black lawyers, black doctors living in this beautiful neighborhood right next to Central Expressway in Dallas. It's a central highway in the city. And the city of Dallas sees that prosperity. They say, oh, there's too much traffic on Central Expressway. What do? They knock down the neighborhood. So all that investment, all that effort, all that professional training, all that skill just destroyed. It's what I called, in some public appearances, I've called bulldozer apartheid. That's an inconvenient fact. State Thomas, we don't want it there. We're going to sacrifice this black neighborhood to make room for a couple of more lanes. And then after the lanes are built, guess what? Central Expressway is too crowded again. It didn't serve any long-term purpose other than to destroy black success and disperse the black population further from the core.
I think we've heard that pattern recognition. We've heard that a few dozen times over the years here at the Context of White Supremacy. Very deliberate. This is in the prologue. Like I said, I appreciate, Mr. Phillips, you very early on in White Metropolis get right to the core. It's White Metropolis. That's the name of the book for a reason, I think. What does it mean to be white? And you write out very specifically, reminded me of a few of the guests who've been with us, Matthew Fry Jacobson, Ian Hani Lopez, going down memory lane a little bit. You write, this book defines whiteness as the creation of white identity. As such, whiteness represents a subjective abstraction receiving a wide variety of interpretations from historical actors. Much of 19th and 20th century political and social dialogue centered on the meaning of white identity, on who was white and who was not, and on the ways in which whites differed from other people. This dialogue extended far beyond issues of color or phenotype and incorporated consideration of whether white and non-white groups had innately different racial personalities, priorities, and polities. The fact that individuals defined whiteness in wildly different ways does not mitigate the usefulness of whiteness as an analytical tool, as some historians have recently argued. Skipping ahead just a teaspoon, for those so marginalized, such as Mexican Americans and Jews, social acceptability depended on moving closer to the white ideal. Being white required not just a European ancestry and a relatively pale skin. Race was also attitude, as will be argued in the following chapters. Whiteness rested on a steadfast belief in racial differences, support for capitalism, faith in rule by the wealthy, certitude that competition and inequality arose from nature, and rejection of an activist government that redistributed political or economic power. Some might accuse John Kennedy of just that sort of violation. Whiteness was most clearly defined by what it was not. It was not black, communal, or socialist. I thought, now, when I read, especially since I saw some of our guests, I thought very important because, hey, the book is called White Metropolis, so what does it mean to be white? Very important to get to that very early on in the book, which you do, Mr. Phillips. And when I read that, I said, I'm going to ask him, if I read all that paraphrase, because you say it's not just about having pale skin per se. White people don't even have white, in quotes, skin, but just being pale enough to be accepted as white, but it's not that totally. Ian Hani Lopez, he said when they got to the Supreme Court in the 1930s, kind of similar period you talk about here, the Supreme Court justices said white people know a white person. When they see a white person, we'll figure it out. That's about as scientific as they got about this. White people know white people when they see. We do the classifying. The most powerful white people, we do the classifying. We're not going to get confused. As you said, we switch it up as we need to benefit us. If we need to adjust things, you might be white today, might be non-white tomorrow, but the most powerful white people, we will decide. Am I being accurate in paraphrasing?
No, that's absolutely true. It's like one of the Supreme Court justices, Potter Stewart, said in a pornography case. He said, it's hard to define pornography, but I know it when I see it. And the same thing is true of white identity. You know, it's fluid. And that's the point I was going to get to when I was talking about Jewish people, is just simply that the power of white identity to hold people to embrace this concept is that you can lose it. If it was a permanent thing, if you were going to be white forever, you could never lose the privileges that came with whiteness. It would lose its power. And I have a new book out about the history of eugenics in Texas. And you had poor whites and working class whites and immigrant whites definitely losing their whiteness to the point that there were proposals to castrate them forcibly, just like they did with African Americans, Mexican Americans, and other people, that they were seen decidedly as racial inferiors. And no one wants that to be on the bottom. And so the quest for whiteness is something that ends up reinforcing the power of the people at the very top. And so that the fluidity of whiteness is the power of the concept to hold everyone prisoner.
I also think very important in terms of what does it mean to be white. Believing in those racial classifications, which I think, unless I misread, Mr. Phillips had already told us, bunkum, no scientific basis for that, which we'd heard before, and they got billions of books and articles and all the rest of it, cut down whole forests saying that, but we still got racial classifications that mean a lot. Tell Lenel Jeter, racial classifications still mean a lot.
Sure.
And to be classified as white, you have to believe in those racial classifications. You cannot be, no, that's some foolishness and we need to, nap. You have to. How are we going to have Highland Park if we don't have racial classifications?
Well, I mean, our immigration policy now is being shaped by the idea that there are very real racial categories. And we have a president saying he wants people from Northern Europe. And that other places, if I can use this language on your program, you know, other people from other countries are from quote unquote shithole countries. That is, you know, that's very racialized language based on the idea that, for instance, people who are from Somalia are inherently somehow degenerate and inherently disease barriers. And we, in my book, I talk over and over again how there's this real conscious attempt to associate blackness and brownness with disease. That these people, you know, these groups, these outside groups, represent a real threat to your health and your safety. You know, they'll make you sick, they'll kill you, they'll rape you, and that propaganda has never gone away. And clearly, the efforts at mass expulsion. You have a candidate for railroad commissioner, which has nothing to do with this issue. A man named Beau French, who's headquartered in Fort Worth, right next to Dallas, now this year, saying he wants to expel 100 million people from the country, 33% of the country. Yeah, and so this is a very real and very pressing. And when I wrote White Metropolis 20 years ago, I was hoping I would illuminate an issue. I never thought this would cause an enlightenment and that we'd get over racism. I knew that was foolish, but I didn't realize the backsliding that would take place. And we are in a very similar period in our racial politics to where we were 100 years ago, which was the period of, you know, maximum lynching of black people, but also the Texas Rangers massacring Mexicans and Mexican Americans in South Texas. And, you know, that was a period where there was a big effort to shut the doors of immigration to my ancestors from, you know, southern Italy and, you know, some of my son's ancestors who were Jewish from Eastern Europe. So this unfortunately is relevant. I think highly relevant today. This book, the book I wrote.
Still have a system of white supremacy racism. So yes, unfortunately, absolutely. You gave a specific definition for what it means to be classified as white, and then you move to bottom of the boat, back of the bus. That this is a little bit further. This is in the prologue still. In response to the pressures of whiteness, African Americans developed an alternative culture that valued blackness and insisted that Dallas live up to its ostensible Republican values. And you go on to give different illustrations of that resistance throughout the years, decades in Dallas. What do you mean, Mr. Phillips, when you use the term blackness?
The idea that there's a community bound together by its shared experiences of kidnapping in Africa, enslavement, reduction to peonage under sharecropping, the terror of the Klan and lynching, and that these shared experiences have created a spiritual community, a cultural community dedicated to making white people live up to their supposed standards. That people who identify as black are engaged in an act of resistance, since blackness is so demeaned in white culture. That this is an act, this self-identity, this embracing of white identity, and the embracing of black culture, the folklore, the Brer Rabbit stories, and some of the stories told in Reconstruction of African Americans outwitting their white oppressors. The tales of revolutionaries like Nat Turner. All of this is, I think, an act of resistance to create an alternative identity and turn the racist definition of blackness on its head and say, we're the true, and Du Bois wrote about this. There are no truer believers in the American creed than African Americans, no truer believers in the gospel than African Americans. We live the Christian faith, and we believe, we uphold the American ideals that white people make a mockery of. And we're going to hold that mirror up to them and demand that they live up to that standards. Did that make sense? Did that answer?
Oh, yeah. Much obliged. Thank you for indulging me, Mr. Phillips. Context of White Supremacy. For listeners, if that did not make sense, let us know. *61. If that didn't satisfy you, if you're a little confused with what he meant with the term blackness. But thank you, sir. The Rebellion of 1860, I think, even with our different authors, or we talked about Texas a few times, unless my memory is bad, which it could be, but I think this might be the first time that I've heard about the 1860 rebellion. I'm even going to put that in quotes based on what you said in the text. But I think this is my first time hearing about all of this. I think this is, wow, especially if all of this led to Martyr's Park. Oh, man. Indulge me just for 2 seconds for me to read two quick paragraphs on the significance of the 1860 rebellion. You write, the Committee of Vigilance. Wow. You cannot be a white person and be ignorant, unattentive about the system of white supremacy racism. They got the Committee of Vigilance secretly interrogated nearly 100 slaves using torture to extract confessions. The Inquisition dragged on for 15 days as 8 suspects languished in jail. The brutalized witnesses implicated all but 3 of the county's 1,074 slaves. By Texas law, all 1,071 suspects faced the death penalty for insurrection and arson, representing not only a massacre unprecedented in Texas, but also a potential financial loss of about $820,000 to slave owners. I'm skipping a little bit just because I think most of us would know, like, oh my God, like, forget these niggers. We can't lose all that money. So he goes through what the financial fallout of all this is going to be and how can we punish the niggers and not lose all of our money. So skipping about 2 or 3 paragraphs down, he continues about this rift that was open. So shortly after the Judge Buford's departure, the committee voted to execute Jennings, Smith, and old Cato Miller, as already agreed upon. A 4th slave belonging to W.B. Miller stood accused of being a ringleader as well. Sure enough, a fight was made to save him and succeeded, but Miller said the Negro shouldn't stay in the county, and he afterward sent him away. Buford said the committee further decided to whip every slave in the county. I've never heard of it. That's what I was thinking. I don't think I've heard of this because, wow, that would seem hard to forget. With all sides satisfied, the committee announced its decision on July 23rd to the agitated mob outside. Jennings, Smith, and old Cato Miller faced hanging the next day. Shortly thereafter, we whipped every Negro in the county one by one. I cannot imagine that I read this before and I forgot it. Like, what? Anyway, a source later told the Dallas Morning News Dealey Plaza. One witness, David Carey Nance, recalled slaves being rounded like cattle and whipped without mercy. Some slaves were almost beaten to death. The sight of the mass floggings, Nance later said, made his blood run cold. And now we got Martyr's Park. Can you give us some context for this? I mean, wow, the 18 rebellion, if you want to put it in quotes.
Well, it's sort of what comes to be known as the Texas Troubles, and this is the year. I mean, the previous year you had the John Brown, attempt to raid Harper's Ferry, and there are a lot of conspiracy theories about slave rebellions. And it's a hot summer. It's during a drought, and a fire burns down what is then a village. Dallas is a village, basically. And later on, there's evidence that workers were on the top of a building. They were doing some construction work. Someone threw a match, and the match caused everything to go in flames. And I never thought this was actually a rebellion. And I want to bracket that by saying the enslaved in Texas clearly had a motive for rebelling, but they didn't have the weapons, and where the places where slave rebellions took place, the circumstances were very different. Enslaved people were smart, and they knew what the odds were, and they knew what the consequences were for a failed rebellion. So there's a panic amongst white people over this fire. They decide slaves had to have set it, and so they began this cruel inquisition, and they end up picking 3 particular enslaved men who one ran the ferry across the Trinity River, so he was in a position of authority. One was a slave preacher. One was known as really outspoken. So in many ways, they defied the expectations of what an African-American man was supposed to act like in that period. So it was a way to crush, I think, assertiveness, and also it is a reflection that white people knew what they were doing, and they knew how cruel and oppressive slavery was. They knew that their enslaved captives had every motive to do it. White people are always afraid, one day black people might do to us what we did to them. And so they panic at any sign of disaster. So that, the fire happens in Dallas. They execute these 3 men. There are fires in other parts of Dallas. Eventually, 117 people are lynched across the state. This causes the South, it was already a police state because of Nat Turner and because of other slave rebellions. This intensifies. Mail is opened up. Suspected white people who are thought to be abolitionists are murdered along with suspected slave rebels. And this really, I think, is a big factor in Texas is the only state that votes on whether to leave the Union. And it's interesting, there are some Texas counties that vote against leaving the Union. But I think that the idea that there had been a slave rebellion in Texas and that the slaves supposedly plotted to murder white people helped rush Texas into the Confederate column. So that's basically the story. And then, so this event had been largely forgotten in Dallas. And then I sort of reminded people of it with the first chapter of my book. And so there was an SMU professor who had already worked on trying to get the site of the hangings marked as a park, and nothing had ever happened with that. So my book got read. It was probably almost 18 years later that momentum finally picked up to get the city to put up a sign that says Martyr's Park, and it's a reference both to the 3 men who were executed for the fire they probably didn't start, and JFK, because Dealey Plaza is not too far from where this lynching took place. And now there's all kinds of public art, and it's a real park. But Dallas named it Martyr's Park. They did nothing with it, and they let it become an encampment for the homeless, and there were empty liquor bottles, and there was trash and human waste and everything at this site that was supposed to be a park in memory of lynching victims during the year before the Civil War. So that's basically the story of that event. Again, it's called the Texas Troubles, and I refer to it as the Dallas Fire in White Metropolis.
Much obliged, Mr. Phillips. That did give me, because it's so close, and I did not grasp the geography that Elm, I guess you talk about in the book, the geography of Dallas, that the black people that used to live there eons ago, they would say Elm, and so this is all really close to Dealey Plaza, I'm reckoning. Am I understanding this correctly?
It's actually a different part. Deep Ellum is, which is which was a major music scene where Robert Johnson recorded some of his most famous songs, and Bessie Smith recorded there, and it was just a major scene for the blues in Dallas that's been forgotten. But it's on the other side of downtown from Deep Ellum, but it is near Dealey Plaza, which is named after the man who owned the Dallas Morning News for decades. And that of course, is where John Kennedy was assassinated. It's like within 2 or 3 minutes walk, Martyr's Park is from where Kennedy was assassinated.
Fascinating. Context of White Supremacy. When I was reading, there were many components of the text, and that made sense to me as well. There were many rebellions that were not reported during the plantation era of white supremacy, slavery, but I think the logic that Mr. Phillips employs, that if this was a rebellion, there does not seem to be an Act 2 in terms of if the black people set these fires, there was no let's escape, let's kill white people, let's run away. Like, it does not seem that there was other than standing around and waiting for white people to catch them. That's why it would seem like they probably didn't do this. It was just a hot summer.
Yeah, that's why I was skeptical about it being, and again, there were slave rebellions in Texas, and one of the biggest ways the enslaved in Texas rebelled was by escaping to Mexico, which is one reason why we had a war with Mexico in the 1840s, right? White Texans were furious that Mexico was giving refuge to escaped enslaved people. But there was a slave rebellion in 1856 in Texas. But in this case, it made no sense. Fire broke out, and then, as you just paraphrase me, there was no Act Two. Nothing else happened. And so if you're in a rebellion, why wouldn't you seize weapons? Why wouldn't you take hostages? Why wouldn't you lead a group to escape? That didn't happen. The fire happened, and then there was immediate roundup, and there was scapegoating. And I think it had a whole lot to do with paranoia about the coming presidential election with Abraham Lincoln, and the misconception that Lincoln was an abolitionist. Who he wasn't, he became one, but he wasn't when he ran in 1860. And the shock in the South when John Brown led that rebellion, and when he was executed, all the white churches that rang bells and compared John Brown to Jesus, and John Brown clubs that formed, that really terrified white enslavers. And so they were on pins and needles waiting for another John Brown type incident. So this fire breaks out and they go, oh my God, here it is. It's happening right here. And they immediately started committing murder. And like I said, 117 people, they think, were lynched in Texas in that summer, July, August of 1860.
Wow.
And then, of course, Texas votes to leave the Union in February of 1861.
Context of White Supremacy. Definitely a method of control for everyone. Make sure that everyone understands what it means to be white and white power in Dallas, Texas. I also think with that level of violence, there is a certain amount of sadism and enjoy. I mean, that is, I can't even, that's like all, that would have to go on for like days to whip all, that is a lot of nigger whipping. Like, man, but either way.
Yeah.
You write one of the statistics that it gave me tremendous pause as I read the text. Like, I'll hush and I'll read. So this is from chapter 2. True to Dixie and to Moses. So this is a teaspoon after the Civil War. You write, the race war that John H. Reagan feared became a reality instigated by white status anxiety, same thing we were just talking about, rather than black empowerment. After the Civil War, gangs of ex-Confederate soldiers and other economically dispossessed elements, in quotes, roamed north, central, and east Texas, terrorizing just freed slaves, Yankees, and their southern allies. The death rate for blacks from 1865 to 1868 was 3.5% higher than in modern-day Dallas, Houston, or New York City. Between 1865 and 1868, whites murdered about 1% of black males between the ages of 15 and 49, according to historian Barry Crouch. I read that and I mean, wow, that gave me tremendous pause. Now, I do not say that I am a statistician, but man, I have not seen too many stats where 1, 2, 5% of a population has been wiped out by murder, and not like COVID or, a nut polio, some other sick. White people just killed them. That is staggering. And in fact, it gave me pause because you have the term gendered violence in the book, gendered oppression in the book. Whew. That, if that's true, you are trusting the work of Barry Crouch. That is gendered oppression right there. I mean, wow, that is staggering.
No. Barry Crouch, he's no longer with us, but he was a very highly credible student of Reconstruction in Texas. And one of the things, I talk about in the book is just that Texas was sort of in the South, but it's on the fringe of the Confederacy, and it's sort of in the West, and some people think of it as sort of the most southernmost part of the Midwest. It's just in this weird geographic space. So when people write about the South, they write about Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, right? They write about the Deep South. And Texas gets left out of that. When people write about the violence against Native Americans, the genocide in the West, they sort of leave Texas out in a lot of ways, even though Texas is associated with cowboys, hence the football team name. But yeah, Texas is kind of kept in its own space, and so the violence in Texas, and it has to be clear, Texas population was a fraction of what it is today. It was the population as a whole. It had never been all that populated when it was part of Mexico, except for Native Americans. Native Americans are most of the population when it was part of Mexico. There was ethnic cleansing of Native Americans. So we're talking about a smaller population, but the violence in that small population was incredible. Texas also was the third highest amongst the states in terms of lynching during the peak of lynching. It hit there, and it was ranking with the worst states of the Deep South. And so Texas has always been an extraordinarily violent place. And, of course, in the period after the Mexican Revolution, 1910 to 1920, the Texas Rangers Law Enforcement Agency and ranchers ended up killing possibly tens of thousands of Mexicans in South Texas.
See, you get it again there, Mr. Phillips, because I asked specifically about the gendered violence against black males, and you deviated from that. Now we got to Mexicans, which is important, but that's not what I asked about specifically. Like, you included it in your book. Like, is that gendered violence if you kill off 1% of black males between 1865 and, 1868?
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of, it's genocidal. It's a genocidal level of violence, and I would say that, and it's an assertion of white male control, so it's gendered violence in that sense. And that's true with the other episodes of violence I'm talking about, including the lynching overwhelmingly of black men in the late 19th, early 20th century in Texas. It's just, the point is that Texas is an extraordinarily violent place, and white supremacy depends on this terrorism repeatedly here, but Texas gets a pass in a way that Alabama and Mississippi doesn't in the public memory, which is why I think that maybe you were a little incredulous at 1% of all black males, 15 to 49, and of course they're going for the men because free men represent a threat to white male supremacy, right? And then the same thing happens with, the threat. There's a threat of Mexican invasion in the early 20th century in South Texas. So all these things are interwoven very clearly with the primary actors in terms of terrorism being white men. Does that make sense?
Unfortunately so. And not that I was incredulous. I'm familiar with James Byrd Jr. I do know a little bit about violence against black males in Texas, but wow, that, as you said, genocidal levels of violence. And when I hear people talk about gendered oppression or gendered violence, black males are hardly ever included, except for like Dr. Tommy J. Curry. It'll be white women or anybody but black males. But to have a statistic like that, and Lenel Jeter, they said that was a part of a pattern. It was lots of black males. Clearly, this is gendered violence, gendered oppression against black males.
Can I point out one other thing real quickly? That part of the shift is, because I mentioned this when I'm talking about the 1860 fire, there is a one difference that's significant. that one thing restraining this level of violence in the slavery period was those black men represented a financial investment. And once African Americans are emancipated, they are seen as thoroughly replaceable workers. And then that's when, like, for instance, Mexican immigration provides an alternative. Poor whites provide an alternative. And there's no financial loss when a black man is murdered to the white population. And so, yeah, so the furies are unleashed by the emancipation. And those black men who are free black men, and if they're successful, disprove the theory of white supremacy, they then become a target and they become expendable.
Maybe even some of the black males that were killed, the three that were killed in the Rebellion of the Fire, like, we might as well get rid. And they sold the other one down the river, or at least got him out of the county.
Right.
You, Mr. Phillips, later on in the chapter, you use the term white culture. Now, I will be truthful. This is a quote from white historian David Roediger, and you do have it, quotation marks and all of that, but you do include the quote in your work, so you are responsible for it. So it reads, the shapelessness of white identity made its possession more uncertain, while the consequences of losing it remained terrible. As historian David Roediger wrote, whiteness describes the absence of culture. It is the empty and therefore the terrifying attempt to build an identity based on what one isn't and on whom one can hold back. End quote. Now I've heard David Roediger, many people quote him, well-known historian, white historian, but the idea that white people classified as white, lack a culture, very prominent, and that's one that I give serious pushback on. We started this here talk off. White culture is Looney Tunes, blackface, minstrel shows, lynching. That is white culture right there. Now you can add a whole lot else to it, but I mean, if you mean culture as in things that this group of people does, oh my Lord, we just had Kellen Hawksworth as a guest on the program. We discussed his book, Transoceanic Blackface. He didn't have Looney Tunes in there. He had everything just like it, and he said this is global white culture. White people from Ireland, Australia, London, they love some Looney Tunes. And then he put the receipts on it for like 300 years. That's white culture. I didn't need his book to tell me that. I had been saying this before that, but that was just, woof, now I can be nice and scholarly. Transoceanic blackface. But isn't that white culture? Everything I just, lynching, isn't that white culture?
Okay, so two things about that. Number one, blackface is also kind of perverted expropriation, right? It's a mimicry of a different group of people. So it's not anything that white people are creating. They're mimicking in a terrible way, in a condescending way, something they perceive in another group. White music. I mean, I think this is obvious. Where does all the white popular music that people mostly listen to come from? It's expropriated, right? The white religion that is dominant in America is expropriated from the Middle East for brown people. So I think that you could make a case that whiteness is built on absence, and the white culture is built around what they're afraid of, which is what the lynching is, and what they envy, but they can't concede as being noble, so they minimize it, which is what's going on. Partly, there's a group, or there's a book called Love and Theft by a black scholar named Eric Lott that has, this interesting approach where he's saying basically there's this weird mixture of admiration and contempt in minstrelsy, and that it's how white people process their feelings about black humor, black musicality, black inventiveness, black resourcefulness, and it becomes all warped when it's performed by white people, but it's there. And so I would say that actually the two things you mentioned indicate black people are scary, so we have to kill them, which is what lynching is, and black culture is something we admire. We can't quite recreate, but we want to, and that's what the blackface is.
We got it again. This is super important, where you did not answer my question, Mr. Phillips. If culture is what you do, white culture, what do white people do? It's not accurate to say that they don't have a culture. Now, you just gave an analysis of the things that white people do as a part of white culture, but is it true to just, if we're being honest about what is culture, okay, we got our definition, culture is what this group of people do. White culture, minstrel shows, racism, practicing racism against black people in particular, blackface, all of that is white culture. Is that true? Yes? No?
I would again say, is it something that white people are creating, or is it something they're reacting to and
I didn't ask for an answer. See there, Mr. Phillips, you're doing it again. This is one of the ways I've concluded that white people practice racism. If the answer is no, you could just say, no, these things are not white culture. But just, hey, culture, things that people do. White people do these things. It's not correct to say that they don't have a culture. They do. Minstrel shows, racism, lynching.
Well, I know, I definitely.
Blackface.
Obviously, that is part of. That's obviously part of what white people do. Now, obviously, I agree with you there. I'm not sure I agree with you on how you're defining culture in that sense, because I think culture, I would define culture, if I may, as something people create. And I don't think they're creating. I think there's mimicry and reaction. So I think that's different. We can disagree on what culture is, and I think that Rudiger's quote, and let me tell you, it is Rudiger's quote. Probably if I were writing this again today, I might revise that a little bit, but I think there's an essential emptiness to whiteness. And like I said at the beginning of the book, it's based on what it's not. And I think that fits in with what Rudiger's saying. I think we have a disagreement over what culture is, and I'm not sure how to come to an agreement on that. But I think I'm still inclined towards what Rudiger is saying. I think the culture is expropriated.
Well, let me pause you right there. I'll pause you right there just to give my thought on that, because it's very similar to white people being resistant to giving a precise definition of what it means to be white. Is very similar in being nebulous. Even I can switch and take Mr. Phillips' definition. Culture is what a people creates. Okay, white people create lynchings. Now that is not a copy. That is not a mimicry. They didn't see no black people doing this and say, we're going to make this white culture. No, that is totally original, people classified as white. So that should be one easy check. Lynching, white culture. Yes, that's a creation.
Okay, I'll go with you there.
Okay, and it shouldn't be that difficult in my view. It seems like a lot of pussyfooting for, no man, white people, all of that at white people, white culture is an absence and a void. No, because they brag about it. They brag, the racist jokes and Looney Tunes. They brag about that. Even the lynching postcards. The U.S. Post Office had a really hard time getting people classified as white to stop sending those postcards. That is your culture. We can't make you stop doing it. We have to punish you. That's what you love to do, and you created them. So by either definition, that's white culture, practicing racism. And they're very reluctant to admitting that, even though there is not. They're more comfortable saying we don't have a culture. Telling, in my view, that is a lie. You do. Lynching, minstrel shows, blackface, practicing racism.
And I talk about the postcard from the lynching of Alan Brooks in the book. In fact, that's one of the pictures at the beginning of the book.
Right.
And,
right. Yes, sir.
No, I mean, if we wanted to define white supremacy itself as the culture, you're 100% correct. No, you're absolutely correct. If I'm comparing what white culture creates compared to what African American culture created, though, I think there's a definite deficit that white people have in terms of substance, in terms of how it it binds people together, how it, perhaps racism is the only glue that holds so-called white people together. So, yeah, you have a point.
Thank you.
Racism, clear. Yeah. But I mean, what I was trying, perhaps I did so, and obviously I did so clumsily. What I was trying to point out is the spiritual emptiness of it, and how it doesn't create community. It smashes a common sense of, in the same, if you compare it to what the black church does or what black music does. I don't think it ties the community as tightly together in a way that there's a sense of belonging and a sense. The lynch mob, I guess, is the closest we've got in comparison, and I think that's a sad, pathetic alternative to what, for instance, black culture has created.
Well, not to get bogged down on this one, but go ahead and finish your thought, sir.
No, I just think that the in terms of creativity, vitality, inspiration, I think that white culture is at a deficit, and so perhaps that's what I was trying to express clumsily, but I'm not denying the whole book is about the centrality of white supremacy to the white community, so-called white community in Dallas. So,
for sure, White Metropolis, for sure. My only quick thought on that before I push forward to the kind of Dallas response to Ole Miss that you talk about in your text, kind of moving forward to kind of middle 20th century, in terms of white community, even white culture, either term, because I say that black people do not have a community, and for the exact reasons that you gave us already. You can't say that black people have a community if white people can say, you know what, I'm going to put a highway right through where you niggers shop or worship or live or go to school or all of the above, and make a pattern of doing that all over the continent and totally destroy so-called black neighborhoods, so-called community. You don't have a community if white people can do that anytime they feel like it, forever. And the best you can do is hope that you can, move to another part of town okay without losing half your belongings or life or whatever the case. That's what I've said for a long time. And I would say conversely for white people, man, just going by the evidence, Highland Park brags about having the best community in Dallas. And by the evidence, it might be true. They got all the amenities, the tennis courts, and you can go to the Cowboys games easy and everything. Like, man, it is hooked up out there. They brag. You want to stay in Dallas? It's dirty. You want to come out here. And frequently, racist white people brag about having the best communities. You talk about some of them in the book. They lament non-white people are coming into Dallas and messing up place. Now we got to go to Highland Park. Now we got to go to University Park and Frisco and all the rest. We just leave it to the dark people, but we going to moosh off of their utilities and such. That is the community on this here planet, the people classified as white. And even my pivot, I said the Dallas response that you include in the book. I was waiting. I was reading this book for JFK, so I was waiting to get to the last chapter to see, like, all right, JFK, from a context of white supremacy, racism. You mentioned James Meredith, because this gives the whole kind of context for what was happening. JFK had to intervene at Ole Miss because of James Meredith, who is a veteran. He's trying to integrate Ole Miss, get the first privileged black male to go get education. General Walker, well, before I get to General Walker, you do include J. Roland Smith and Carol Hurd, letters that they wrote in support, and these are Dallas females, white women both, I think. They write in support of, much obliged, they write in support of Mr. Meredith and saying, this is a disgrace, and I do not support saying, a person has to go to school here or they can't go to school there, and that's not cool, and blah, blah, blah. And I was waiting, I said, but wait a minute, where's General Walker's response to all of this? And it was not there. And I said, whoa, that is, like, how do we talk about the environment of the JFK assassination, Dallas, early 1960s, and not include General Walker, regular January 6th insurrectionist? General Walker from Dallas, Texas, says, hey, we can't let no James Meredith at Ole Miss. We need 10,000 racist white people to storm Mississippi, across state line, and go and keep this nigger out. They go get thousands of white people, have a mass riot. President Kennedy has to federalize the National Guard. They kill 2 white people. Robert Kennedy puts General Walker in the loony bin for not, he should have been in prison, but they put him in the loony bin for 90 days, and he's a hero to white people in Texas and Mississippi. Like, how in the world is a white Dallas Texanites paramilitary response in Mississippi, how did that get left out of the book?
Well, I was focused on, he didn't actually, okay, so what I did instead was I talked about Hunt, H.L. Hunt, who is part of the right-wing infrastructure, and I talked about the Minute Women in Dallas and Houston. And so Walker had been written about frequently. So in the space, you're only given so much space in a book, and I had to cut material. I had more in my original draft on Walker than ended up in print. And so I just made an editorial choice. He was important, but I thought the long-term people, the people who were in Dallas for a very long time, who were creating modern far-right wing, people like H.L. Hunt, who created basically what became hate radio, Rush Limbaugh, things like that, people who created some of the first stirrings of the party of Reagan and the party of W and Trump. I thought that was the more important story. If I had more space, the publishers were willing to publish a 400-page book, I would have gone into Walker a lot more. He's important. I allude to him, but I felt like these other people had a bigger impact on Dallas itself. And that was my focus, is to look at the politics of Dallas, the racial politics of Dallas itself. Walker's impact was obviously national, and he had a big impact on what events in Mississippi. I've written about him in other works I've done, but I because he had been so covered, I wanted to look at people who had a bigger impact on the city itself.
I see. That, I guess it makes some degree of logic, even though, I mean, unless I'm misinformed, I don't think J. Roland Smith and Carol Hurd I don't think they had that big of an impact on that. I don't think their impact outweighs General Walker. I would have subbed out those two letters from two white women because there's a lot of that making it seem like they're white allies and sympathetic white people. Like, those two letters are greatly dwarfed by one white man being able to say we need 10,000 racist white people to invade another state because one black veteran wants to go to school. I think that, and particularly it weighed even more because later on in the text, when you say, this is in chapter 7, all the JFK, where I was looking forward to, a blight and a sin, chapter 7, where you write, the El Paso School Board, so you give the context for the response to the Brown v. Board of Education decision and how in some areas it didn't pass. There were some, I guess, supportive or white people who were not supportive of this aspect of white supremacy racism. The El Paso School Board approved a desegregation plan by a 6-to-1 majority within months of the 1954 Supreme Court decision, and San Antonio, Corpus Christi, and Eagle Mountain quickly announced plans to implement Brown. Texas school districts with the largest numbers of African American students, such as Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, and Galveston, dragged their feet in complying with the court decision. But such battles were usually coolly legalistic, not marked by the glandular outburst accompanying desegregation in the Deep South. That's why I thought it was important, because there is so much violence in Dallas at this time period that I thought it was dishonest to have these two letters of these two white chicks in saying that they support James Meredith when you have a paramilitary racist rally that starts right here in Dallas, where they go to another state. Like, at least if we take out those two letters, we could at least get a paragraph in for Walker.
Yeah.
Even hang on one second, and even that it was not just coolly legalistic in Dallas, but General Walker won. And then even Dr. King, the fact that Dr. King, it was so bad, black ministers said, you can't come here. No way. Like, you were upset. That alone is violence. And then when he did come and spoke at the Fair Park, they got bomb threats. That for sure has to count as violence, yes?
Right. No. But I will say this too. Walker, when he ran for governor, finished 6th. You know, so I his impact was okay. I mean, it's fact. He didn't have. I mean, there was plenty of violence, and I cover the violence in Dallas extensively in the book. I question in the city itself what his impact was, and his impact in electoral politics. He made a big impact in events in Mississippi. And so I just made an editorial choice, whether I was going to, focus on someone who had been written about a lot. And while I felt like the far right and racist infrastructure created by wealthy people like H.L. Hunt and W.A. Criswell and people like that, which I feel had decades of influence. They were basically forming Ronald Reagan's Republican Party there in Dallas in the 1950s and 1960s. I felt that was a longer term thing, and the fact is, there is the type of violence you had at the University of Mississippi. There's also the type of violence you have from malnutrition, environmental racism,
Henry Wade.
All those. Judicial. Henry Wade's racism. Which I just wrote a column I hope to have the Dallas Observer publish about Henry Wade's many crimes. But anyway, that is what the Republican Party of Ronald Reagan is, the chief type of violence they're going to create. And so I think long term, that is the, in medical inequities, stolen theft, all that claims lives and claims health. So my choice was to focus on how Dallas was creating the structure of racial oppression for the late 20th century, early 21st century. The book was published in 2006, and so I chose to focus on that more than Walker. But I can understand Walker is obviously a major figure, but I chose to focus on some of these other figures more because I felt like their type of violence and the type of politics they were creating was going to be what dominated America almost immediately after the Civil Rights Act was passed.
Oh, that's true with H.L. Hunt and some of these other D.H. Byrd and some of the other dealies running the newspaper. That's very accurate for that. Suite 8F in that time period. Absolutely. Murchison, that's Clint Murchison. So many of these powerful white people, can't think of all the names, but with Henry Wade specifically, you said it's been about 20 years since this book has come out. Now, you do literally talk about Henry Wade whistling Dixie and challenging other white people to be more racist and to oppose or uphold states' rights, and we're not going to have all this government intervention into our way of life and all that type of a thing. Right. When this book was published, had it been revealed in terms of all the information about all of these different cases, Mr. Walker and the folks that we played at the very beginning, Tommy Lee Walker, Lenel Jeter, and James Lee Woodard, had that information come out by the time you had this book published, or no?
I don't think it was as well known, and I didn't come across it. I've written a piece now that I plan to, I've submitted to the Dallas Observer, which is a weekly newspaper, and I will tell you what I've discovered is that there was a manual
right.
for prosecutors, for juries, jury selection, where they were saying, they didn't just include black people, they include Dagos and Jews and overweight women and overweight men, and they wanted to be sure that men always outnumber the women, and so there was a 1963 jury manual. There's something called the Sperling Memo that said don't let black men or women or anyone who will sympathize with a minority on a jury. Don't allow it. And Sperling was an assistant DA under Henry Wade, and he said, I don't like women on juries. They tend to be sympathetic to the defendant. Keep them off. Any group that's ever been, any group that might feel like they've been persecuted, keep them off. Make it white men only. And so this was decades. And so I'm currently involved with a group called Human Rights Dallas, and we're trying to get, incredibly enough, Henry Wade's name is on the Juvenile Justice Center in Dallas, which itself is a product of white supremacy and a place where juvenile offenders are physically abused and physically neglected. And his name's on that building. And it was interesting to see all these tributes to Cesar Chavez vanish instantly when that New York Times story came out. But Henry Wade's name is still on a public building. And so I'm going to try to get that name removed. We're making a public campaign, and we're going to talk to the Dallas County Commissioners to try to get that done. I did not know all of this when I wrote White Metropolis. I knew some of it, and I knew about his racist campaign for Congress and, his clear white supremacy, so I included it in the book, but I've learned a lot more since.
His offspring, Henry Wade, they when some of this information started coming out, and they noted that, even I do want to point out, because I saw they have a great documentary that documents the code book, literally a code book about how to select a jury, and it's exactly what Mr. Phillips just said. No niggra, and they say like no Dagos, no Jews, no nigga. Well, I think they do say black people, but yeah, no black people, no minorities, and they said that this was the policy for years. They didn't even have any black people, period, in the attorney's office for years, so everyone followed this. Mm-hmm. And then by the time they did get one black person, he said that I think I might have been the only person who did not abide by this policy. Even once they got rid of this racist code book, everyone still follows this policy, and they exclude black people from the jury. I do want to add, they didn't have no cases of, oh man, we got all these white women that have been wrongly convicted. I didn't see none of those cases. They didn't have no cases of, oh man, all these Dagos. They didn't, none. I didn't see no cases of, oh man, all these Jews. None. It was just Jeter.
Black men.
Thank you. Privilege. Some of them can't even say poor black dudes, because Mr. Lenel Jeter, he had a STEM degree. He was an engineer, gainfully. He had just got a raise. So, man, like, you could even be well-to-do, college educated. I'm doing constructive things. Hey, I'm not no moocher. I pay my taxes. You still go to jail. Yeah. And for reading the Bible, in Texas, no less, for reading. Anyway, one other. Irene, you just mentioned all the schools. I'm not surprised that Mr. Wade still has a school named after him, or the juvenile detention facility. Thank you.
It's actually the juvenile detention center. It's the juvenile justice center. So this is where they're imprisoned, and it's a hellhole. It's an absolute hellhole. These are underage defenders who are overwhelmingly black and brown.
Of course, black males, I suspect.
Yeah, mostly black, but quite a few Mexican Americans too, and it's really brutal, and so so this it's basically a juvenile jail,
of course.
It's disturbing, and I mean there obviously were cases like Lenel Jeter was famous. And there was a case of, there was a movie called Thin Blue Line, which is a documentary about someone who came within days of being executed, who was railroaded into the death house by Henry Wade. So when they named this building in 1995, there should have been questions. And I've since done research about him. Because I made a speech at the staff at the Henry Wade invited me to make a speech as the city of Dallas and the city of Dallas staff, and based on White Metropolis, they wanted me to talk about the book, and I show up and I say I'm at the Henry Wade Juvenile Justice, and I knew about his racist campaign for Congress, and I also knew how Dallas DA's office treated black defendants in particular. And I said, this building is named after a really bad person. Why is that? And, but I've done some research recently, like within the past few weeks, particularly because of this recent exoneration of Tommy Lee Walker. And, got into the stuff about the manual for the juries and they're essentially like it's a case of a white guy, but the movie Thin Blue Line, essentially you had someone who was more obviously the gunman in the killing of a Dallas police officer, and you had this man who was the person who was sent to death row, and Henry Wade picked the man who was sent to death row because he was over the age of 18. He didn't want to go after the obvious gunman because the gunman was a juvenile at the time of the shooting, and he couldn't get the death penalty for him. And this is the kind of logic that Henry Wade used. He wanted maximum sentences, and if he could kill people, he would. And so the man's a monster, and I guess it's fitting, the mythology in Dallas was this is a tough, no-nonsense, but very effective, brilliant prosecutor, and so they decided to name a building after him. And it's a very Dallas thing. I was a leader in the movement of to take down the Confederate monuments in Dallas, and Dallas loves racist white people, and they love honoring them, and they fight tooth and nail. And I got a death threat when I was one of the leaders of the movement there. They said, I got an email saying, watch where you go. Someone might take you out, because I wanted to take down Confederate statues. And
wow.
And at the same time, they were saying, well, why are you worried? They're just statues. But if you take them down, we're going to kill you. So that was, and so the Wade thing, I don't think people are going to fight the same way for the Wade name, and I think we're going to be able to take it down. But anyway, so yeah, we were successful, by the way, in Dallas. We did take the Confederate monuments down. We took down a 60-foot statue, a Confederate War Memorial that was by the Convention Center. There was a Lee Park. It has a new name. There was a giant statue of Robert E. Lee that Franklin Roosevelt dedicated in 1936. It was carted away. We have school names that have been changed, but there was a lot of resistance. And one of the things that was interesting in being part of that movement was discovering the profound ignorance about the Civil War and the number of Dallasites who still believed that the Civil War was, quote unquote, about states' rights without ever being able to explain what the state right was, which was the right to buy and sell human beings.
Oh, I've just concluded a lot of white people lie, and that's one of their big lies, because once again, it always gets away from white people practice racism. And incidentally, I do want to point out that S word I used previously. We were talking about white people in general. It was after the, so I'm putting quotes around it, Mr. Phillips, so-called rebellion of 1860, that all whipping 1,000+ black people when it seems like they would have probably kind of known, this probably didn't happen. But hey, we got them under our foot, so we're going to whip them all. I said there seems to be a certain amount of sadism we just enjoy punishing, particularly niggras. For Henry Wade, especially, you said this is a white dude, and Thin Blue Line in this case, where, hey, we think the dude who did this is a juvenile, so we can't do the death penalty, and we like to fry him up. It's Texas. Texas tough. We had Robert Perkinson as a guest on the program. We love maximum death penalty, and we show you, but we can't do it if it's a juvenile. So we put it on this adult, even though he might not have been the one who did it. Hey, adult, fry you up like, wow. That we aren't even about justice. We are about sadism. I like to punish people, and I like to kill people. That is crazy. You are supposed to practice justice, like I'm looking forward. Yeah, I don't want no 17. No. You gonna let the killers go free? Yeah, and it seemed like that's how I was even thinking that when you have a system that's not about justice, when it's just, hey, we take any old James Lee Woodard, we take any old Tommy Lee Walker, we take any old Lenel Jeter, even if they were at work and we know they didn't do no crime, got 9 alibi witnesses. So what? When you've been doing that for decades, like racist Henry Wade, man, this is what we do all the time. Maybe sometimes we do this all the time. We do this with some white people too. Whatever. This is what we do. It does not surprise me at all.
Forgive me if I'm going off your topic just a little bit, but I'll just say about the issue of sadism. The white people are sadistic. The white culture in America has been sadistic. But I think there's a discomfort sometimes with openly embracing it. So we have this new system of lethal injection. And all the evidence is that when we lethally inject people, we drown people to death. And it takes longer than the electric chair did. And it actually may inflict more suffering than the electric chair did. And the criminal justice system knows this, but they're able to sell it because it imitates a medical procedure. And it seems like the person's asleep when all the evidence indicates that they're feeling a great deal of what's going on, that they're able to sell this as a more humane thing. But it's really every bit as sadistic as the electric chair or hanging was, or all the other techniques we have for killing people. The state does.
Texas tough Robert Perkinson, he was with us to chat about this. There was another point where I said, man, this is kind of a major omission in my opinion, even though I know this book is older. It's been 20 years, so information and such comes out. But some of this was kind of available when you gave that long list of all of these monuments to dead racist white people, most of them dead white dudes. One of those in Texas William Cabell, former Confederate general and former mayor of Dallas. And when I read that, I had to pause for a moment because I said, wait a minute. And then I looked and I said, whoa, wait a minute. All of this racist nepotism. So his grandfather, William Cabell, and then his son becomes mayor, and then his son, Earl Cabell, becomes mayor. Earl Cabell's brother at the time of the Kennedy assassination is Charles Cabell, is the deputy director of the CIA, and even the way I would have to explain it. So, third generation mayor at the time of the Kennedy assassination, Earl Cabell. The way I would have to explain it, the way that it's on declassified government documents now, is Earl Cabell, CIA asset, period, full stop.
Right.
Separate sentence. Earl Cabell, brother to Deputy Director of the CIA, Charles Cabell, period. Like, these are two separate, like, I would think that the latter would be enough. Like, whoa, your brother is the Deputy Director at the CIA? You're already an asset. That's not how they think. He has an independent relationship with the CIA dating to 1953. When I already knew that when I read this book. Now, that is newer information in 2007, although some of that is newer information, him being an asset. Charles Cabell being in the CIA is not new information. That is very old, and his brother being mayor of Dallas is very old. When I read this, I thought, man, that is kind of massively important, I think, to the power structure of Dallas, and even that nepotism, that you have a third-generation mayor who is connected to the Confederacy, literally. His grandfather. This is what we brag about in this state, bragging about our history of racism, and we were a part of the Confederacy, and we whipped them niggers, and all of that, and all this is a part of the racist ethos. All of these people, Kennedy fired Charles Cabell. Like, all of these people either hated Kennedy personally, or hated him for what I said at the beginning when you gave your definition of white in the book. They think that's why they got it on the front of Mr. Dealey's newspaper on November 22nd, 1963. The H.L. Hunt, General Walker, in fact, Ted Dealey, he had gone to the White House. Ted Dealey is the owner of, Ted Dealey, the nepotism of Dallas, Dealey Plaza. Ted Dealey, that's not named for him, but I mean the nepotism of Dallas. But Ted Dealey had went to Washington, D.C. and called President Kennedy a weak sister and a tricycle riding president. You're not a man. You're not a cowboy. You're not dealing with these communists, and you supporting Patrice Lumumba, and you bring in Martin Luther King to the White House and all this old nonsense. These white people think that you are a race traitor, Mr. Kennedy. That's what they think of him. And then he comes to this city where a lot of maybe all of the white people that I just named. That's why I played that clip at the beginning. That attitude of that nigger-loving Kennedy got what he deserved.
That first generation of the Cabells, by the way, that Confederate officer committed war crimes during the Civil War. So yeah, it's a sorry legacy.
He still got a school though.
Yeah,
he still got a school, didn't he? You said he still got a school.
No,
didn't
he got. I think he got taken down. That was one of the. I think that's. My memory is fading. I'm getting old. But we had a large number of Confederate named schools that we got changed, and I believe Cabell Elementary got changed. Yeah. In fact, if you Google my name and Cabell, I believe that'll come up on Google. I wrote a column from the Morning News calling for that, and that was eventually done.
Right on. That's one of the reasons that I do support keeping those monuments up and just put the plaque next to it to explain war crimes and all of that. But just if you can give some of the details, because I don't think enough people know the white racist power structure of Dallas. That would include, I mean, even just looking at the people at the time of that Dallas assassination, November 1963. So, as I just said, so you have the mayor of Dallas, who is a CIA asset, and his brother, Charles Cabell, deputy director of the CIA, was fired by John Kennedy. You have Henry Wade, racist, literally whistling Dixie, prosecutor who goes out on television immediately and says Oswald did this, lone nut. We don't need to investigate no crazy racist white people in Texas who might have also wanted this. Just Oswald, cut all that down. General Walker, he doesn't get invested. The mink coat mob, Ted Dealey of the Dallas Morning News, where they've called Kennedy a race traitor on the front page of the paper and said he was supporting race riots in the country. They had just had the March on Washington in 1963. Can you talk about some of the context of the white racist power truck, white oilmen, white businessmen, white racists in Dallas who hated Kennedy and would have been the owner of the Texas Book Depository, I forgot, D.H. Byrd. He took the window and made it a trophy in his house. He was a part of these white men. They hated Kennedy. They were racist. They hated him for his racist his policies against racism here domestically, and his international policies of supporting anti-colonial efforts like Patrice Lumumba in the Congo. Can you talk to that racist power structure in Dallas that wanted Kennedy dead?
Well, I will say that, they saw him as a force for desegregation. If I could put a footnote on what you're saying here, I think the movement pushed Kennedy to support civil rights. I don't think it came from Kennedy above, and filtered down to the masses. I think that King constantly had to, in many times, embarrass Kennedy into taking action. When Kennedy would go on a foreign trip, the movement would have a desegregation campaign, and both Kennedys, Bobby and John, were furious. So that dynamic was there. It was a movement from the bottom up, not from the top down. But, and I don't think you were saying it was from the top down. But anyway, in Dallas, the oil millionaires who were the ultra-right, who were funding the first radio propaganda network. They had a program called Lifeline that constantly depicted Kennedy as a communist, that said fluoridated water was a communist conspiracy, that said that the United Nations was a communist conspiracy, that depicted every African liberation movement as a communist conspiracy. That was funded by Hunt. That was you had you mentioned the Cowboys. I don't know if you're familiar with this. For a while, the Dallas Cowboys were owned by another oil person other than Murchison. Murchison sold it to a guy named Bum Bright, who took out the ad that said, "Welcome to Dallas, Mr. Kennedy." Are you familiar with that ad?
Oh, my God. Absolutely. You can give listeners some of the context because I think that's important. Yes, sir.
Yeah. It was basically like a wanted post. Mm-hmm. And, that there was like a bill of indictment with a picture of Kennedy, like a wanted poster, in the Old West. And that ran in the papers when Kennedy arrived. And Bum Bright, who is a oil billionaire, Texas A&M alum, who bought the Cowboys in the 1980s from Clinton Murchison, yet another oil billionaire. That was it. They funded the John Birch Society, which was constantly fueling paranoia about the Kennedy family and the Kennedy and about Franklin Roosevelt, and even called Dwight Eisenhower a communist. So this was definitely the epicenter of the far right in America. Dallas was at the time Kennedy came here. Every possible extremist was drawn to this city, and they were banning books in libraries. They canceled Picasso. They had a Picasso painting removed because Picasso was a communist. So Dallas was in the hands of the very extreme right. And I would characterize, I don't know how liberal Kennedy would be by the standards, say, of the later 60s. He was pretty much a cold warrior, but I would say that they felt like he moved too fast on integration, and they were upset definitely about the sending of the National Guard to Ole Miss, about his relationship with Edwin Walker when Edwin Walker instigated the riot at Ole Miss, and Bobby Kennedy had him mentally examined. That caused an explosion of rage against both JFK and against Bobby. And so, I mean, this was, many people before Kennedy arrived were terrified that something would happen to Kennedy if he went to Dallas. And he had advisors say, don't go. And of course he went ahead and he did it because there's a split in the Texas Democratic Party between John Connally, who was the conservative wing, and a senator named Ralph Yarborough, who was on board with civil rights. And in fact, one of the strange things is Texas, two senators in the 50s, LBJ and Lyndon Johnson, they were always excluded when the ultra-segregationist senators met and wrote what they called the Southern Manifesto about how they were going to undermine the Brown versus Board of Education decision. They wouldn't let LBJ or Ralph Yarborough participate because they didn't think they were on the same side. And Ralph Yarborough was definitely in the liberal wing of the party and was all in on and of course Lyndon Johnson ends up making, the first major bills, the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act of 65 when he becomes president. But anyway, so that's the context. And LBJ himself, of course, was assaulted by the right-wing mob when he and Lady Bird visited in 1960 when he was campaigning as JFK's running mate.
Much obliged for the context, Mr. Phillips. I do want to add, I certainly did not say that JFK was liberal or that he had some sort of personal euphemism or some sort of personal development where he said, hey, I, on my own, have come to these conclusions that we need to help black people and support civil rights and get these laws. I certainly do not think that. I think Minister Malcolm X did a brilliant, eloquent job articulating the different ways that President Kennedy practiced racism, white supremacy before he was, even after the assassination, and talking about all of that. So and even in fact, I would connect it to LBJ and Senator Yarborough, even with LBJ and what he may have done, civil rights and all of that. I do know he severely, extremely escalated the conflict in Vietnam, where they bombed and killed lots of non-white people and even got lots of black. Muhammad Ali could have kept his title if it wasn't for LBJ. So I do not think of he or JFK as white people who were not racist. It's not even possible, particularly after I read your book. Like, that's not even possible. Like, to be classified, accepted as a white person, you have to practice racism. That's why they blew JFK's brains out. I keep going back to that definition. I don't say this. The white people in Dallas and many other white people around the country and the world said JFK, they put it on the front page of the Dallas Morning News. He just told us JFK is a race traitor. I had to put that race word in on it because they don't say that, but that's what it is. He is a race traitor. And then when you read the lists that they put in the paper, that's exactly what did they say. He's supporting race riots, and he had them niggers in the March on Washington. That was just weeks before Kennedy was killed. He had them niggers, invited them to come up there and talk about civil rights and all that. He's messing up our way. He is a race traitor. Even when they say communist, that's the same thing. You are a race traitor. You're supporting all these anti-colonial movements in Cuba and Africa and Vietnam because you don't want it. You're a race traitor. You're not a good white man. We need a cowboy who's going to go in there and bomb these non-white people. Get on in there, LBJ, Texan. Get on in there and hook it up for your white brothers in Texas so we can make this money and we can go and kill non-white people. It's a win-win. We get money and we get to kill we get rid of some of the black people here. We can ship them on, and we don't have to look at Muhammad Ali no more. It's win, win, win. And we get to make money on this. Like, oh my God, it's the best thing ever. I didn't, and even the wording that was used, I think is so important. It's not extreme right. It's not like I said, far right, extremist, racist, white supremacist, right wing. That's it. They have so many different euphemisms for not saying racist white supremacists had many reasons to kill John Kennedy. You can go and even get by names. What was their conduct before he was killed? What was their conduct afterwards? Did they benefit? Like check with all the boxes. Some of these, they bragged about it, called him a race traitor before, afterwards, and then got their money. We're going to go to Vietnam and all the rest of this. I guess the sweet AF, I felt like there could, or I guess some of this information is newer in terms of the CIA connection, but I will go back to that in terms of that nepotism of the Cabell family. Was that one where you didn't have time to go into? Because I think that is like, there should be a whole biography on the Cabell family and the white power and nepotism to run a county where you have 3 different generations of mayors and the CIA affiliation. Like that is, were you not able to?
There are so many.
Go ahead.
I wish I could have written 5 or 10 books about Dallas, because I think it's such a complicated and really, in a strange way, reflective of the larger country the city is. I think that the country is, Dallas is more like America, only more so. I think the structures of white supremacy here are more, there's plenty of violence, but I think it was more sophisticated than what we saw in Birmingham and other places in the South. In many ways, they had a greater sophistication with the use of soft power, the demographics of the city with the large Latinx population and the Jewish population. They were able to play divide and conquer more brilliantly, I think, than other southern places. And they managed to package it in a way to make them look sophisticated in a way George Wallace never did, or Ross Burnett never did. And so, I wish, I had to pick and choose what to look at, and I wanted to look at some other elements about, like how did Jewish people become white in Dallas? How did Mexican Americans become not quite white in Dallas? And use that to try to explain how black people continue to be marginalized when these other groups face pressure and prejudice too. So, it was a choice. If I had to write it again, I might pick other things and other characters. But I think overall it's held. I will say that when I wrote this as a dissertation at UT Austin, my dissertation committee was a little incredulous, and they said, well, Dallas isn't that bad, is it? And then when I began to speak to Dallas and I spoke to audiences, like I said, I've spoken to more than 100 different audiences over the last 20 years here in the city. People in Dallas said, oh, you got it. You nailed it. You captured how the city of Dallas and its the racism here works, how the racial politics works. And so I feel the work stands. I was going to say one other thing about the Dallas Morning News that I think your listeners need to understand in its role in the politics at the time of the JFK assassination. If you look at the editorial pages of the Morning News in the late 50s and 1960s, it isn't all that different from something David Duke would publish in the 1980s. It was breathtaking to me researching in the late 1990s and the early 2000s how naked the racism was while the city was achieving the image of being a sophisticated place. And those liberation movements in Africa, like the Civil War in the Congo, etc., they portrayed the warring sides as cannibals sharpening their knives for each other. And you had, we were talking about blackface earlier. Basically, blackface minstrelsy in the editorial cartoons of the morning news in the 1960s. And I think that people don't realize how close to the present day that kind of imagery is. And it really captures, I mean, no wonder they thought John Kennedy was a dangerous revolutionary given their politics.
Context of White Supremacy. You can see some of those images online. So it's really easy if you're in the state of Texas, but even if you're not, they have a lot of that content online. It is fascinating. You can see climate of white supremacy racism. There's one important point I wanted to bring up before we let you enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. You in talking about the era of lynching, kind of late 1800s, early 20th century, you talk about how lynching and the threat of kind of almost just cannibalistic, beastly raping black people and black males in particular, how that was used as a means of political control. And specifically in the chapter 4, Consequences of Powerlessness, you write that Dallas elites had used lynching as a form of institutional violence to control dissent before the Civil War and during Reconstruction, and to suppress black assertion in the early 20th century. This proved a risky strategy, as violence often spun out of control and passed from elite to lower class hands. The Jim Crow system that fully developed in Dallas after the 1920s represented a more subtle and effective form of establishment dominance, kind of what he just said. Lynching had oppressed both black men and white women. Now I read that, I gave full pause. Now he had talked about, different forms of some white females either being denied the vote or harmed in some sort of manner. I didn't read anything that compared, like, even remotely to 1% of white females being killed in Dallas. I thought, man, is Mr. Phillips lying to us? Lynching had oppressed both black men and white women? Did I miss something?
I mean, I hope maybe it came through or it didn't come through. The patriarchy that white and black and brown women were subjected to meant that women didn't control their own bodies. Reproductively, men can regulate their bodies, and sometimes those pregnancies result in death. The rape culture that is prevalent in this society, women aren't believed when they're raped. The domestic violence that is part of the patriarchy. So, I mean, women do get beaten to death, and they do get abused, and they do get molested when they're underage. And, we all know all about the Epstein class, which actually is the same class that was the slave owner class, basically, right? I mean, there's a continuity between the slave owners and the Epstein class of today. No, there were 1% of women weren't killed, like in an orgy of violence, but women are subjected to, all women are subjected to a constant torrent of violence in the culture.
Pause right there. Wait a minute. One, I do not agree, and I don't think the evidence supports that all females are treated the same. Non-white females are not treated like white women now, nor at any point in time. So that's one. Well, that's not what you just said. You were saying women in general, and that's not what we have, and that's not what we've had at any point on this here planet as we were dominated by white supremacy. So that's one, like, gigantic one. Now, even beyond all of that, hold on one second. I'm gonna let you respond. Just give me 1 second. Just give me 1 second. Because the other component, not just all females are not treated the same, but the other component with white women, specifically with what you just mentioned, lots of individuals are mistreated. Like, yeah, I know about the Epstein file. I mean, the Catholic Church, you got lots of white boys who get mistreated. I bet they got some of that in Dallas too. If they have a Dallas diocese, I would have to check. That's not in the book. That is not in any way compared. Like I said, when they gave the pattern, Mr. Ward, who is he? Is he targeting down and out bedraggled white women? Because it's got to be some of them. Not all of the white women in Dallas are in Suite 8F. You got to have poor, illiterate white women. He didn't go and target all of them. It was black dude, and any kind of black dude, poor black dudes, educated black dude, doesn't matter. Black dudes. That's what I'm saying. Like, that seems like a flagrant lie to say that lynching and where are if the lynching oppressed black females, black men and white women, where are the lynched white women? It should not just be that you got all Cato and all these black male bodies and victims of racism. Where are the lynched white women? It's not like they would go see a white woman and a black male and then go lynch the white woman. They always punish the black dude.
Okay, so here's the point I was trying to make. That there was a kind of a covenant that white men made to white women. And I want to be clear. I wasn't arguing that white women and black women and brown women were treated the same way. No. In fact, white women often participate enthusiastically in the oppression of black men and Mexican American men and so on. Yeah, I mean, there are women in the Klan. There are women who are advocates of eugenics. I just wrote about a book of eugenics. But what I'm saying is, this bargain was made basically with white women by white men, that in return for your political subservience, that you will not have the same political power or economic power that white men have. We will, quote unquote, protect you against these black, mythical black male beasts. We're going to frighten you about how dangerous they are. We're going to tell you that you're in mortal danger from them. But in return for us protecting you, we expect obedience. And I think that's a fair point, that white women did lose something. I'm not saying it's exactly equivalent. One can be oppressed and not be oppressed at different levels, right? I mean, anti-Semitism in America could result in a synagogue being bombed, but it's not the same thing as 1% of black males being murdered in Texas. It's different levels of oppression. And women have had not the same share of economic and political power that white men have, and some of it's grounded in that bargain of white supremacy. So I think this is sort of what you would agree with, right? That white women have participated in white supremacy in return for the supposed chivalry that Southern white men are going to give them, Northern white men are going to give them. But on the other hand, they lost something in the bargain. That's the whole deal with whiteness. You don't really gain. Whiteness is a losing bet. And the same thing with the gender politics, that you get the illusion of protection in return for a loss of power. Does that make more sense?
Not at all. It just seems like you are using buckets of words to lie to us even more, especially when I come back visually. I've seen the images of Lady Bird and LBJ being terrorized. Those white women look like they have gained quite a bit. In fact, they were called the mink coat mob. In fact, even if you just get to hang out in Highland Park, you have gained quite a bit. And it's not just white men out in Highland Park. The mink coat mob was white women. But I can't. Hang on, you're interrupting. I listened quietly on mute, so allow me to retort. And even, in fact, I'm just going to go to the book, because I did read this. They accused me of being illiterate. Me and Lenel Jeter, we do read a little bit, even though that is dangerous activity. You write in the book, chapter 4, Consequences of Powerlessness. Negrophobic images. I didn't see no Looney Coon images of white women. White women have always occupied a position of power in the iconography of white supremacy, but be that as it may, negrophobic images of the black man as ravishing, beast, suffuse the language of even counter-hegemonic movements such as Texas feminism to the extent that states suffragists hitched themselves to the cause of white supremacy. Texans advocating extending the vote to women distributed a leaflet published by the Congressional Union for Women's Suffrage. Will the federal suffrage amendment complicate the race problem? Question. Some suffrage critics charged that an amendment granting women voting rights imperiled white supremacy because black women would be given the ballot. Many Texas suffragists countered that the addition of white women to the voter rolls more than made up for the risk. In all the 15 southern states except Mississippi and South Carolina, the white women greatly outnumber the Negro women, the Congressional Union leaflet declared. In 9 of these states, the white women outnumber the total Negro population. There are in the southern states 2,017,286 more white women than Negro men and women put together. And they had that in all caps, end quote. In effect, women's suffrage would double the white vote. The leaflet pointed out that black men ostensibly possessing the vote had already been denied the ballot due to duplicitous registration requirements. The same could be done to deny black women's suffrage. The leaflet implied, with the addition of white women's ballots, female political equality would solidify, not dilute, racial inequality. And this is the sort of thing that I mean, like certainly you have different levels of power amongst people who are classified as white, but man, white women are not, and certainly not to be saying that lynching oppressed black men and white women. I can only conclude that that is a lie, like to even be phrased in such a way that would suggest that there's some sort, like you said, there's supposed to be levels, which I don't agree with that, but that sentence doesn't even suggest levels of mistreatment. If it's 1% of black males were killed over a 3-year period, and all you can tell me is that a Texas white woman like Sandra Day O'Connor was smacked around or didn't get to vote for a little while or whatever. But by the time we get to the 1960s, we do have the mink coat mob where you have white women, a gang of mink coat wearing white women smacking a vice presidential candidate and his white wife. And you're going to tell me that they are oppressed? Like like Lenel Jeter? How am I to interpret that as anything other than, unless you have some evidence that's different that's not in the book, how am I to process that logically as anything other than a lie? That is not true.
I'm arguing the passage you read, that and we're talking about middle class and upper class white women actively embrace white supremacy. That's what I'm arguing. Okay? What I'm saying is, in a truly democratic society, that women, first of all, would not be subjected to rape culture. In a truly democratic society, poor white women wouldn't be dying, bleeding out in parking lots because of abortion laws. In a truly democratic society, women would not be dehumanized through pornography. And that's you can make an argument that that's dehumanizing and making a cartoon of women that promotes sexual violence. I mean, all of that's true. Yeah, that women surrendered a degree of they don't have the same power white men do. That's all I'm arguing.
I don't agree with that. Okay. I don't agree with that. Like the things that you just noted, every white woman does not have to participate in pornography. every white woman does not have to participate in rape. Every white woman participates in the system of white supremacy racism in some way, shape, or form. Is that true?
Well, white people all benefit from white
I didn't say
supremacy.
benefit. Can you
white
answer my
women
question,
have-
please, Mr. Phillips? Just answer the question. You've done that a lot. Every white woman participates in the system of white supremacy racism. Is that true?
I think I've known some white women who have participated in anti-racism. So, I mean,
you don't think those white women
that they
ever
all
did anything racist? You think those white women, they're totally absolved. They don't do anything else.
that-
Okay, so
Yeah,
let's go
no,
back.
no.
Answer my question, please. Does every white woman participate in the system of white supremacy racism?
Well, yeah.
Okay, then. Every white woman doesn't participate in court. Hang on. You got to talk. Hang on. And I'm still submitting.
Okay.
You've presented no evidence to change my opinion. You're lying. Every white woman doesn't participate in pornography. Every white woman is not raped. And you know what you ignore? You know who is most likely to be raped in a system of white supremacy?
Black women.
Non-white people, males and females. That's in Texas tough. Rape of black males and even rape of black males by white women, which they don't talk about at all. So you're not, hang on, you're interrupting me. You're interrupting me. I have listened to you without interrupting. Now, you have submitted anecdotes. Right. You gave direct statistics in your text. 1% of the population being killed. Right. White women have a much longer life expectancy than all the black people and even white men. There's no logical evidence that you can point to tell me white women are to have a sentence, much less that sounds like lynching somehow oppressed white women in a manner comparable to black males. You are lying. That's all I can conclude. You talked about it now for 5 minutes. You have no evidence other than, they're not even anecdotes to just mention a so-called rape culture, which, hey, have you seen that documentary? Let me tell you about black chicks talking about the history of white supremacy and pornography. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God. Woo. Or have you read the book Rethinking Rufus that talks about the rape of black males in the culture of white supremacy racism?
I am familiar with that.
You said yes?
No, I mean, yes, I have.
Okay. That's what I mean. Okay. Like, we're not going to talk about white women like they're the only people that are subjects of rape.
No, you're accusing me of lying, and I don't. I mean, that's not true. I'm trying to make a point like I did about whiteness, okay? It's the same bargain, same Faustian.
Oh, you're just, okay, we pause. I've heard all that, and I do not agree. I do not agree, and you don't even have any other evidence. You just keep saying the same anecdote.
We don't agree, but this was.
No, we don't have to agree. I do not have pause. I do not have to agree. I can disagree. I have read. You have no evidence, and I can disagree. I have free opinion. I have concluded you are lying. And for listeners, this is a common racist lie where white people suggest that and even think what he just said. All white women practice racism. How do they then get to come back and be victims of racism if all white women practice racism? I'm going to be like, hang on, I'm going to be like Henry Wade. You cannot be a perpetrator of a crime and then hop back and also say I'm a victim. No, that's not how this courtroom works. You're on one side or the other. White women are not, and you haven't shown us any evidence to change my mind, they are not oppressed, and certainly lynching like you are. Emmett Till, are you out of your mind? For Emmett Till, even though that's not Texas, for Emmett Till and Carolyn Bryant Donham, white women are not oppressed as a result. In fact, Dr. Tommy Curry, I've mentioned that before, he said people like you have done a great job, white historians, of expunging the role of white women in lynching and racism by not mentioning they were present at a lot of these lynchings and making it seem like it was just white patriarchy. That's not even true. And even reminded me of the work. We had a black scholar on our program who talked about the number of white women who owned slaves in next door neighbor Louisiana. In fact, he talked about the numbers of white women outnumbered white slave owners in some states like Louisiana, he had the raw that's what I mean. He had data. This was not just him talking and giving platitudes about pornography culture. He had looked at the statistics, the slave deeds, male or female, white woman or white man. White women outnumbered white men. This is in the 1800s. Right. That's what I'm saying. So, based on evidence. At any rate, I'm going to look for other... No. Hang on. I'm not interested in that question anymore. You talked about it for 5 minutes, and I'm not going to change my mind.
Okay,
Thank
I'm
you.
just saying, you read a long passage.
I stopped on that a long time ago. Are you going to practice racism and talk over me now? I can't go to other questions? You talked for 5 minutes. We can't move to something else?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Moving to something else in the program. Okay. Thank you. Even all that interrupting, I pointed that out, the not answering questions and the interrupting, I suspect, is directly, willfully practicing white supremacy racism. And I'm a highlight for what? To suggest that white women are oppressed by lynching? Come on. That's like Jerry Jones level of tackiness. Make sure I didn't miss any of my questions. Do you practice white supremacy racism, Mr. Phillips?
I am a product of white supremacist culture, so yes.
Can you pick out some specific ways that you have practiced racism in your time on the planet, other than your conduct this evening at some of the points?
Okay. I feel like this conversation is becoming prosecutorial, and I'm just going to say I'm going to talk in my defense.
I can't do it. For Henry Wade. Woo! I can't.
No, you read a very lengthy passage where I said
you're slipping. Wait a minute. You are slipping back to. We already talked about that, Mr. Phillips. We already spoke about that. I said we were moving forward to talk about something else, and you keep.
I'm not sure why.
Any hoodles.
This.
Thank you for your time and energy, Mr. Phillips. I did have one or two more other questions that I could have got to, but we got bogged down. Oh, wait a minute. Let me make sure I get one of our listeners. Hang on. Let me get one of our listeners. See, you keep interrupting me. I shouldn't have to say that. We got a listener. Caller in Florida, did you have a question for Mr. Phillips? We did briefly mention Florida, talking about areas that have lots of rapes. Florida would be one. Caller in Florida, did you have a question for Mr. Phillips? Retired firefighter. I'm sorry. My fault. I got confused. That was my fault. Retired Florida. My fault. Retired firefighter in Florida. My bad. Continue, sir.
Yeah. I was kind of like very much intrigued on the discussion. But what I was going to ask the guest, because I heard the name H.L. Hunt over and over again. Are you aware that he did business with the Nation of Islam and Mr. Muhammad? Could you talk a little bit about that, if you do know that he did business with the Nation of Islam?
Yes, there was a financial relationship, and it was reminiscent, actually, of the relationship between Hiram Wesley Evans, who was the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s, and I'm a little rattled. I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember the gentleman in the 1920s, Marcus Garvey. That relationship was very similar to H.L. Hunt, because they were both interested in racial separatism.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
did you?
So he helped. Yeah. That H.L. Hunt from a white supremacist standpoint, and of course the Nation of Islam from the black nationalist standpoint.
Okay. Also, his son, Lamar, he created what is now called the AFC. Right. But at that time, it was the American Football League. And it merged into the NFL. which he gained a lot of assistance from black males with that dangerous sport. Are you aware of that?
Yeah. Lamar Hunt was a founder of the American Football League. And, I think there's something very disturbing about our professional sports that, the CTE levels, the way the leagues lie about the brain damage caused by the game of football and by other professional sports, and they conceal the information. But, Lamar Hunt was very involved in that. I will say that the Dallas Texans integrated their team, and in fact the Cowboys did, right at the beginning of their existence. What was the Houston Oilers that became the Tennessee Titans later maintained a segregated team for years, and that was owned by another oil man, a segregationist oil man, Bud Adams. And they played in a segregated stadium at Rice University when they were first founded. But the Hunts were absolutely central to the forming of the American Football League. And what happened is the AFL signed a lot of African American talent to a degree that the NFL didn't, because there was it was an upstart league and they were trying to catch up with the NFL.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I would like for it to go back to what the host was discussing with you.
Much obliged, retired firefighter in Florida. Fun, or I guess it's not fun. I shouldn't say fun. Racist fact. Lamar Hunt, who started the AFL Kansas City Chiefs, which did start in Dallas, and then they moved to Kansas City later on. But Lamar Hunt, I think even credited with starting the Super Bowl. But the team now owned by his son, Clark Hunt. We talked about that white nepotism. See, lots of examples of that today. The Cabell family in Texas, and I think, unless I'm in error, the Hunt family, they still are rooted in Texas, even though the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously that's Missouri, but their office, I think, is still in Dallas specifically, because I think they own like a local, like a soccer team or some fuzzball or something else they own. Anyway, probably worth like billions of dollars. But anyway, Lamar Hunt, so the dad, not the current owner, but his dad, Clark Hunt's dad, Jack Ruby, who assassinated Lee Harvey Oswald on television in Dallas on November 24th, 1963, Jack Ruby allegedly had Lamar Hunt's phone number in his address book when he was arrested. And the Dallas police said, what's going on here? How do you have Lamar Hunt's number? And he didn't explain before he perished. And Lamar Hunt did the same thing. Lamar Hunt, they don't share all the information, like he said about the CTE. Lamar said, well, I don't know. What you mean you got it? Dallas, very important city for understanding the JFK assassination. That's it. I don't think, make sure we didn't miss anybody. I don't think we missed anybody else. Any hoodles. The broadcast, we've been chatted up about the book White Metropolis. Even make sure I give out the full title. I laugh so much at the Looney Tunes, which again, I say, white culture, that is a creation, along with the racism and minstrelsy and all the rest of it. But White Metropolis, Race, Ethnicity, and Religion in Dallas, 1841 to 2001. I did learn lots of constructive information, but that always stands out to me. Somehow white women are victims of lynching, because I've heard that from other white people before, like 2 thumbs down. I've seen no evidence. I think that is a massive racist lie, but that notwithstanding, we have been chatting it up. Admitted Racist, Mr. Michael Phillips. I do appreciate the time and energy. I will be looking forward to the book on eugenics in Texas, because that is a subject that we have talked about a lot on this here program. So I will be looking forward to the new content, sir. Much obliged for hanging out with us this here Tuesday evening and allowing for a little pushback on your text, sir. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you kindly. Context of White Supremacy. I would prefer that, the tepid response, because we are not friends. I say that to the victims, so that's certainly true for the... Am I supposed to be jumping up and down and looking for a hug for someone who says that they are an admitted racist? Gus T, and Gus T. Quick commercial. We'll be right back. Let folks know what to expect for the rest of the week. I know we will have the Catherine man for Mr. If you have not heard of Lenel Jeter, because I didn't know who he was before today, even though he's not in this book, all those black males that I played in the intro, they are not in this book, but they are all victims of white supremacy and specific victims of Henry Wade, who is in this book and talked about as a racist, and that is a part of the racist Dallas structure we have been talking about. But I just looked them up because this Henry flipping Wade, we didn't go into more detail about that, but this guy came out on TV immediately and said, Oswald, same thing I said, when you don't practice justice. That's why Mr. Fuller said that, the genius. Fuller said you don't call enforcement officials police. Why? Because they don't practice justice. When you're in a system where you practice white supremacy racism, you don't practice justice. Henry Wade, I don't practice justice. I lock up niggers all the time. Mr. Walker, Lenel Jeter, I just lock up black males. That's what I do. So the president gets shot in the middle of your city. Does he practice justice? Let's get all the facts. Let's reserve judgment. Let's not jump to conclusions. No. Oswald did it. Lone nut. He didn't have any help. He did it alone. Wait a minute. I don't even think they got this dude's name yet. Like, wait a minute, before we get to all that. He did it, I'm sure of it. How do you know that? That's when you don't practice justice. We just, whatever. Like, even a white dude, I lock up an innocent white man as opposed to a guilty white 17-year-old. Why? We like to fry him in Texas. What is that? Produce justice. That's why Fuller said that all the time. Why? Because justice would be better. Justice would be better. Way better. Jesus Lord. Let's see. And white women are not victims of lynching. Like, ever. I don't know when that got started, but I've heard that before. Like, man, they don't even have a name, like one name. Like, man, they found Leroy laying in bed with that white woman and they went and lynched her. They don't even do that. They at least got John Brown, right? They at least give us Viola Louisa. They don't even have one name of a white woman to make a martyr out of her like that. White women is the, come on, let's see. We'll take a quick pause and then we will be right back. CTE, sneak that in even for Mr. Jerry Jones. Context of White Supremacy. Quick pause. We'll be right back. Let's see.
Got another term on there, VGQ. What does that mean? Victims Guaranteed Qualification. Now, that keeps you from getting into arguments with other black people, particularly on television, which I get sick of that. Black people shouting. You know, we get into our ghetto thing once we get on television and get wound up. And we start all yelling at once. And the racists sit there smugly and just look. They watch the tennis match, so to speak. Right? And black people are shouting each other down, talking about, you don't know what you're talking about, and so and so and so and so, and we go into our Amos and Andy and Sapphire Act. Okay? VGQ means Victims Guaranteed Qualification. Guaranteed qualification to do what? To give your opinion on anything about race. Don't care what it is. If you're on there with Minister Farrakhan, or you're on there with Mike Tyson, or you're on there with Miss, what's her name, Williams, the lady that had him put in, you know, recommended that he be put in jail, or you're on there with anybody. So you don't cut the other black person down. Now, I don't even like that term brother and sister, even though it's been around for about 30 years. But I ain't going to talk about the brother here, you know, no. See, we haven't reached that stage where we can do that. See, we got to crawl before we walk, but we don't miss any steps. Don't say you are what you're not. Don't say you feel something that you don't really feel. You don't really feel that he's a brother. I usually use the expression, I don't like anybody in here. I say that to all audiences. I haven't been taught to like anybody. I've been taught to dislike people. Been taught that. And then they're taught to dislike me, so it's just compounded disliking. I haven't even got to love yet. All right? So what we do is minimize conflict, try not to hurt each other. So a certain thing, that's what a code is for. It's a stopgap. It keeps me from saying something against you. You say, well, don't you agree with what this person just said down here on the other end and whatnot? That person has VGQ, Mr. Donahue. I keep using him because he's one of the most prominent TV people. Right? But the main thing you do is try to stay off of a radio program or TV program or even a neighborhood stage program, you might say, where you spend your time shouting back and forth at other black people. Nothing is getting done there. And when it's done on television, a lot of black people just get up from the TV set and go on in the kitchen somewhere. Once that shouting starts. Yeah, they get disgusted. Say, they say, oh, here we go. They started off okay, but now they're doing a job on each other and I don't even want to hear it. So just don't do it. And you cut it off. The cutoff point is that person has victims guarantee qualification. You spell it out what it means. Meaning the person can say anything about race that they want to, and I can say anything about it that I want to. You are guaranteed that. You earn that as a victim. Simply by being a victim. Now, if a white person says something, that's something else.
We here at the Context of White Supremacy, Gus T took that to heart. A white person says something, I for sure can say what I want to, and address it if I think they're being truthful, not truthful, whatever, and I will. I'm not going to argue and go back and forth. What you say, retired firefighter? What you talking about the Hunts? I'm not going to, do all that. White person, that's something else entirely, and I generally looking forward to that. Both might say, well, what is the benefit? Number one, I think we non-white people, our culture has been, and courtesy of racists, our culture has been focus on other victims of racism. Focus on other black people. It's your fault. It's your fault. How we respond to racism and blah, blah, blah. The problem is white people. And I would much rather take my views about what I think is happening with regards to the system of white supremacy racism. I'm not going to argue with no victim. I'd rather talk to a white person. Let's see what they think. Let's use counter-racist logic and see what they think. And then I can just point out, sir, I think you're lying. I wouldn't do that with a non-white person. White person? Oh, yeah. Oh, and I said, that should happen. Because white people lie all the time. They lie all the time. That should be at least one question per program. Like, are you lying to us? Are you lying? And that's kind of an easy one. Like, white women are oppressed like black males with lynching. Wasn't the Emmett Till? Wasn't the Carolyn Bryan Donham, so she's a victim there too? Really? Come on. I'm going to say one thing, man. Old Mr. Phillips, and he might be a doctor. I just wasn't saying that because he didn't have it on his title. If it is there, I'll correct it and put it in the description. I'm all about, he's got his doctorate, give him his title. Mr. Phillips, when retired firefighter came on to ask his question about the Hunt family, oh my God, they are so important to all of, they hated race traitor John Kennedy, the Hunt family. They hated him. H.L. Hunt hated him. Anyway, when he asked his question, and Mr. Phillips said, you have to give me, I'm flummoxed and discombobulated. You got this old radical Negro in here asking me, talking about I'm lying and that you practice racism, all that. Like, that should happen. That's what I mean. It should not be no, I'm looking forward and you're a sellout. You don't know what you're talking about. It. Ooh, don't let me get started on Obama and all that. All come on. Somebody emailed me today about Candace Owens. Are you out of your mind? Are you out of your mind? Yes, Dr. Welsing said we don't qualify for mental health. Please don't ever write me nothing about no Candace Owens. Who do you think I am? I don't care nothing about Candace Owens. Like ever in life, for the rest of my life, I will never care about what Candace Owens is doing. Period. The problem is white people. See, that's what I mean. That's how we've been programmed. That old Candace Owens. What is she in charge of? She run your child's school? Candace Owens keep you from getting a raise? Mortgage? You go through TSA, Candace Owens smack you around, stop you from getting on a flight? You have to tell me something. You try to get a passport, Candace Owens, you gonna stay? What is she in charge of? You're talking about a victim of racism. It's lots of victims of racism that, I find not pleasing. So what? The problem is white people, like Michael Phillips, telling us white women are victims of lynching, oppressed. What? But he was discombobulated, and I think white people are not accustomed to non-white people asking, are you a racist? Now, I've had a number, I'm going to make a sound clip of that. We've had racks of non-white people come on this program to say, Gus T, this is nonsense. You're wasting time. Why get a white person on the program and ask them if they are racist? That's just goofy. It's silly because all white people is racist, even though we heard half of that today, too, about the white women at least. It's more white women on the planet than white men, so that would mean more than half of the white people on the planet practice racism. We got about a good, 55% or so of them? According to Mr. Phillips? But I've heard that bunches. I don't hear other programs. I mean, if it was tons of programs where they'd be like, all right, Whitey, are you racist? All right, Jane, are you? If I heard that on lots of programs, I would just go listen with y'all because that's a lot easier. Like, I don't have to worry about reception. And, hey, I ain't got to read no book. Spectating is real easy. I could do a whole lot of spectating. Easy. Call in and clap and agree. Boy, that Gus T or whoever the host is, I could do that easy. I do not hear that. I think that is, particularly in an environment where aggressively the problem is allegedly white people are ignorant. Mr. Phillips didn't say that. He said, I'm informed about racism. Commonly, it's white people are ignorant. White people, not all white people are racist, and those who are racist are ignorant. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. That is about as bad as white women are oppressed by lynching. That's nonsense too. I don't know if it's layers. Those are about 1A and 1B. They're pretty equivalent. He deviated so frequently he would not answer the question. He wanted to talk about the Jews and the Mexicans and all of that. This book is not called Jewish Metropolis. This book is called White Metropolis. Let's focus on the problem. We can get to, Gomez and all that. Maybe, we got, as he said, we got limited time. Why are we going to slip off and not focus on who is causing all these problems? Who's in charge of the racial classifications? That was important. He did say that. That's a big part of being classified as white. You got to believe in and be about the enforcement of these racial classifications. That is, that's why you got to think about racism. You can't be ignorant because you got to know these racial classifications. Can't be letting anybody in the Highland Park, sundown towns. Last thing, I'll get in right quick. Charles Cabell. I guess this is one if you're not like a JFK researcher or a U.S. security historian. The name Earl Cabell, Charles Cabell, these might not be relevant to you. once you begin to examine, if you do, JFK history, what have you, these names become very important. And even if you don't, Charles Cabell, Deputy Director of the CIA, when you start talking about how did Patrice Lumumba get killed, how was Fidel Castro almost killed, when you start talking about global system of white supremacy racism, people like Charles Cabell, Allen Dulles, these names would become very, how did Patrice Lumumba get assassinated? These people, I got it. Mr. Cabell, Mr. Dulles, got it. Okay. But these names become very important, and I did think that was an important omission, that family of nepotism. If we're going to waste time to include letters from white women in Dallas that give the impression that they are not racist, we can skip that and include this family, 3 generations of white power and racism and mayoral nepotism in Dallas. I think that is massively important. I mean, you could take this all the way back to the Civil War in terms of generational white supremacy that would be in power in Dallas that was opposed to Kennedy and thought of him as a race traitor. You have violated your duties as a white man, and we're going to kill you, which he talked about. White people do that in Texas. We will kill a white person if you have violated your oath as a white man. White woman, absolutely. And you're a race traitor. You're out of here. I think that would have been worth at least the same thing I said with General Walker. Like, that should be included. That's January 6th. Now, I mean, this book was published 20 years before. That notwithstanding, I think you having a white man who was in the U.S. military calling for 10,000 racist white people to cross state line, invade another state, not for a horde, not for 100, not for a dozen, for one Negro veteran. I think that's worth a paragraph. Even if it's just that James Meredith is a bad mother, shut your mouth. I'm talking about James Meredith. Even if it's just to give him his respect, he's still with us. Man, they sent thousands of armed race soldiers to kill him. He didn't blink. He went to class the next day. That's James. Talking about James Meredith. That's worth, I think. And I would rather have an extra paragraph to give him his due and what he had to endure from white people who didn't even live in Mississippi, as opposed to give us the facade. Well, it's not all white people is racist. These white women wrote a letter. When even wrote 2 letters. We crossed state lines to kill. You tell me what you think is more important. And then for Rob Kennedy, get it on the record. Gus T did not say John Kennedy is not racist. You did not hear that come out my mouth. You did not hear me say Robert Kennedy is not racist. I did not say that at all. Robert Kennedy, John Kennedy, these folks knew about COINTELPRO. Again, Minister Malcolm X excoriated them both better than I, before and after the assassination in Dallas. Minister Malcolm X, lock, stock, scholar all the way, may have even been a part of the reason why he was killed. I did suggest, wonder aloud, was the CIA, COINTELPRO, were they directly involved in having him dismissed from the Nation of Islam in response to his comments about JFK? We know the NOI was heavily infiltrated. H.L. Hunt might have even cheered about that. They even have documents about how the FBI, they were elated about Minister Malcolm being booted out of the Nation of Islam. So was that a part of their plan too? They had been instigating the feud between he and Elijah Muhammad. Did they give that order directly, indirectly? He needs to get on out of here. Look at him out there saying that sort of thing. Chickens coming home to roost. I could be wrong. Maybe we'll see that in the next batch of releases. Before we get out of here, retired firefighter, do you have commentary you wanted to get in right quick? H.L. I do think that's important because there are those who suggest H.L. Hunt and the white power conglomerate in Dallas, these are the people who orchestrated the assassination of John Kennedy, and to do so in a city where you would have the mayor, the police, and the main newspaper all in conjunction with you, so they support this, support the narrative that you want, support the investigation that you want, the story that you want the world to have. You control all of that in an environment where everyone thought this guy was a race traitor, and where he's killed right next to Martyr's Park, where we lynched them niggers. I think he said it's about 2-3 minute walking distance from Dealey Plaza, Martyr's Park, where we lynched them niggers. I think that's important too. Did you have quick comments you were going to get in, retired firefighter?
Yeah, I was thinking about something. That's one reason why I brought up the H.L. Hunt Nation of Islam, is because I can't remember the author of the book that I read a long time ago that stated when Malcolm made that comment in the press conference after the speech that he made about the chickens coming on the roost, that sort of thing. Somewhere in that book, it mentioned that how shaky or uncomfortable Elijah Muhammad was of it because of the real connection that had taken place between the Nation of Islam and H.L. Hunt. Another thing, and that's why I almost didn't want to bring it up, what I was thinking about, because what you were doing was, to me, was much more important as far as your type of discussion with the guest. I've seen this a lot, where a white person who would agree with a lot of things that are racist, and they thinking because it actually happens, where the non-white person that they're talking to would actually, calm down and be so happy that it's a white person that speaks the way he does, and you are somewhat you're consistent about being about business when it comes to it, and he was not getting the satisfaction that he was looking for. In my observation, last but not least, what was ironic about the Kennedy assassination was the wife of the governor. I don't know, it probably was maybe minutes or seconds before he actually had his brains blown out. She stated to him, turned backwards, and said to him in the motorcade that you can't say that Dallas doesn't love you, Mr. President. And very shortly after that, he met his fate, by getting his brains blown out. And that's all I have to say. Thanks for giving me the opportunity, and thank you.
Much obliged, retired firefighter in Florida. I guess you should be thankful that you were able to get a response from the guest. He had to compose himself to even answer your question, as though I flustered him, even though I will say he was the one that kept interrupting me. Like, it was so important for him to keep going back and insisting that white women are oppressed. It's like, no, I've listened to all of that. Big and move, like, I'm not going to change my opinion. You don't have any extra information or evidence to add to the dialogue. Let's move. No, I got to talk on these white women, and they made a contract. See, they made a deal, and they agreed to it. Like, come on, man. Like, let's move forward. Like, and in fact, and then when I asked him about him being racist, and he did that. That's one thing I will say. When you talk to a white person, hopefully that's been exemplified here. I'd much rather you can practice this with other non-white people, no problem. But I mean, hey, the real deal, the people who cause us problems and are in charge and deliberately lie and withhold information, they are white people. Very important to get them to answer your question. And he did a lot of that, just even white culture. I don't know why that. Now, again, unless somehow it benefits racists to have us, their victims, think white people don't have no culture and they're just goofy. And so, no. They have a culture. It's practicing racism, minstrel shows, blackface, lynching, the postcards, all of it. That is their culture. And you even said that they're like, you say I'm wrong, and you say it's because my definition of culture is wrong. What's your definition? Creation. You have to make something, produce something, see? Oh, even if we take that one, all right, I'm a doofus. I just don't know what culture is, which might be true. I'm niggerish. Lynching. They didn't go and see no black people with the ropes, scaffolding, and we gonna lynch you, Kunta, because you didn't see this. That's white people. Yeah. So that's white culture. Lynching, yes? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's good, in my opinion. That's goofy. You got whole books. I got pictures, homies. They fill up the whole. You go to wherever you are. You go to University of Miami. Go Hurricanes. You go University of Texas. Go Longhorns. University of Washington. Go Huskies. Wherever you at. You want to pick one in University? Hey, Michigan. NC the Final Four. University of Michigan. Go Wolverines. You pick the library. You go and look at their lynching section. It's going to be massive. That's white culture. I got the pictures, man. I post them. I wasn't even looking, really, to see how big the lynching section went. We had Washington. They don't even have a whole bunch of niggers here. That's not Washington State history. How many Leroys and retired firefighters who got uppity, and we had the lynch. That's not Washington State history. But UW Library, they got a chunk, a section. Lynching Negras. Read all about it. For months. Take you probably 2-3 quarters to read all that. It might take you a whole undergraduate career to read all them lynching books. There's so many of them. It would take years. That's white culture. The minstrel shows too. You got 300 years of white people putting shoe polish on their face, and you gonna look me in my face and tell me seriously, that ain't white culture. You could have fooled me. And all over the world. This ain't no USA thing. Nah, man. Ireland, Australia, UK, Prince Andrew and them. All over the world. White people.
They don't even physically know each other.
Facts. But they relate. Same culture. Same culture. Right. Mistreating black people, and it's fun. That's why I said that's the core of it. See, with the racist jokes and all of that, this is enjoyable. This is not no laborious. We gotta go. We love this. Blacking up, and we know all the way. Go to see the same minstrel performance 50 times, so we know all the words. We can sing along. Look forward to this. Our favorite. Like I said, they do the minstrel shows in places where there ain't no niggers. That's your culture.
I believe it was the Dutch that followed that example that you just mentioned. That they would do that, and not a black person around.
It's racks of them, internationally and domestically. They love them. That is your culture. That's what you do. That's what they create. Minstrel shows. And take time. Elaborate performances. Tumbling dice. Did you have commentary you were going to add, sir? Were you just listening in, or did you have commentary? Tumbling dice. Might just be listening in.
No, Gus, I would just like to make a mention about something with the white woman. See, a lot of people don't understand. the white women were the one that raised these white males. So for him to say that the white lady or the white woman are revolts to lynching, see, that's a lie right there, because see, most white males are raised by their mom, who are white women, and 9 times out of 10, they're the ones who teach these white males how to practice racism against their little school buddies, and even against their bus driver driving the bus. You see, that's learned behavior from their white mom teaching them. So whatever he was saying, that's just bogus. So I just wanted to add that. And thanks for letting me share, Gus.
Much obliged, tumbling dice. He would have direct knowledge about those. When it's so much of that throughout white culture, white mothers, and their flagrant white supremacy racism. They teach the child what they say. That's the first teacher. That's what they teach their children, and then going out to advocate and practice racism on behalf of their children. You talked about some of that in the textbook. That's white women in the classroom practicing racism, and then the white moms. You can't have our child in no school with no niggers, and oh my goodness, with writing letters and all the rest of it to make sure that happens. So, like, oh my God, that's the Highland Park situation too. Like I said, he even that when he said that earlier as well, that black culture is so great in comparison to white culture. Oh my gosh. I didn't ask him what black culture is. Now, he had said that about the black church and all that, but man, respect to Mahalia Jackson and all of that, I have said black culture is really, really pitiful, especially in comparison to the system of white supremacy and what's going to be required to produce justice. Like, oh my God. Like Fuller said that Negro culture is really raggedy. Cosign Gus T. Like, what in the world are you talking about? Like, if black culture was that creative and ingenious, we would have solved this problem a long time ago. Put that on Coolio or whatever Negro culture is supposed to be, rap music or whatever else. Like, get out of here. Incidentally, one quick thing I want to share. We're doing our quick anecdotes. Retired firefighter mentioned football. I was reading all this on the history of white supremacy in Dallas, really just to get to the JFK part of it, which we did, right. But the Dallas Cowboys, by the time they get to the 90s, where it's Jerry Jones, who would fit right into all of this. I think he would have been right in with H.L. Hunt and the folks who are accused of plotting in this Kennedy assassination. He would have been right in there with them, white, racist, oil billionaires. We said Rooney Rule, Jerry Jones don't hire no black coaches, and all the rest of it. Jerry Jones, when they won the Super Bowl, the Cowboys in 92, the very first time, they had a parade in Dallas, as we just did in Seattle after winning the Super Bowl. They had their parade. They had a melee like you would not believe. Now, this has become pretty common where they have shootings at the Super Bowl or other championship parades or brawls, melees, very common. But I did not remember this at all. I had never heard anyone say anything about this. They have whole documentaries about this, and they have video footage because it happened in the 90s, so this is not ancient history, so it's like color. Oh my God. And the kicker, why this is somewhat relevant, they investigate because it was reported. You can go look at the news reports from this time period and the TV reports. They reported it as this was a somewhat racial disturbance because it was about, I just told you, they won the Super Bowl. So they win the 92 Super Bowl, but that's like it is now. It's January. At that time, it wasn't even February, so it was January of 93. So they had their Super Bowl parade, I think, like the first or second week of February. This is like maybe 10 months after the LA riots, Rodney King. In Dallas, not California, although they did have disturbances beyond LA after the kerfuffle, Rodney King and all that. It wasn't just in California. So they say that it's a lot or a disproportionate number of black people who are hopping on white people and Mexicans, they say, Latinos, they say. And they show the footage, and it does seem like there's some, at times, black people hopping on white people, smacking them around and such. But the craziness of it is, I think they said that the estimates, it was a little less than 500,000 people at this first time around parade. They said, I think they had maybe like 300 police officers, which seems crazy to me. And it looks like, whoa, when you look, I have never seen, like I've seen craziness, which again, this is why I didn't go to the Super Bowl parade this year. I was hell bent on getting out of Los Angeles before they clinched the World Series, not last year, the year before last, which I did. But oh my God. And for it to be broad daylight, this was like noon. This wasn't nighttime. This was broad daylight in the middle of downtown Dallas. It looked total lawlessness. Like you could have blown a whole lot of people's heads off. And it's just, oh well, I was trying to get out of there. I couldn't see about it like, oh, and I don't remember this. And I don't even hear anyone talk about this. Like they have Emmitt Smith on camera. Like he said, I tucked my jewels because I thought I was going to be robbed. I was telling the people, like, protect me. Emmitt Smith, he should have been. And he said, I was scared for it. And it was like pretty much all of the players, except for like Michael Irvin and one or two others, said, I was scared for my life. I thought we were going to die. Troy Aikman said, I hid in the car. I thought we were going to be attacked. What? But it did look that bad. Like if I had been there, like, oh my God, security, police, oh my man, it is one of the craziest things that I have seen in terms of like just sporting. It's right up there with like the Malice at the Palace in Detroit. Like, and people don't even talk about it. They act like this didn't even happen. Jerry Jones said, I wasn't even aware of this until I saw it on the news. They had people got stabbed. People got stabbed. People got stabbed. It's the craziest thing I've seen in a man. They act like it never even happened. Moving right along, they changed security up drastically because they won the Super Bowl again next year. So they had massive, it was like military police presence next year when they won the Super Bowl and had their parade. And same thing when they won it, I guess 3 years later. Massive police presence, big crowd, all the rest of it. But I learned a lot reading this here book and talking to our white guest today. I didn't learn anything about white women being victims of lynching, but I did learn a lot even connected to the Dallas Cowboys. Retired firefighter, you did bring up the NFL and all. Do you remember, is that in your brain computer? Do you remember like a racially tinged melee at the Dallas Cowboys Super Bowl parade in February of 1993?
I sure don't. I sure don't. I know a lot of history of the sport, but when it comes to that, actually, it's kind of too modern for me, because I know more about the origins of football. But when it comes to things like that, I'm not aware of it at all. But being that where it's at and what team it is, I'm not surprised at all.
It is fascinating. Like I said, they have documentaries that were done. Some of the local, like Texas scholars at the universities, they did projects about all this, and it's recent enough, as retired firefighter was saying, that they have lots of archival footage. I mean, they had cameras in the 90s, so it was the parade. They always have lots of cameras at the Super Bowl parade, so they had lots of cameras. So there is lots of footage of this. It is something to behold. I'll just leave it at that. And like I said,
and this was the parade?
Yes. They had, I think, and what makes it for me even more, I guess, however you want to process it, embarrassing, whatever, they had extra time. They normally do the Super Bowl parade like within a couple days of when the team wins the big game, whatever it is, NBA, whatever. They waited. I think they had the longest delay between when the Cowboys won the Super Bowl and when they did the parade. I think it was like 3 weeks or something, but they waited a long time, and they still had no prep security at all. I mean, to have a professional football team out on parade, the owner, coaches, at Jerry Jones, that it at times looked like there was no police presence, security at all. Like, you could just walk up and grab whomever. Like, if retired firefighter and I were in the crowd, we could just walk up and snatch Emmitt Smith and, hey, black brother, and you see this happening. People coming up and snatching them. Like, it is the craziest thing that I have ever seen to be relatively like modern history. And people, like I said, people got stabbed, and I'm surprised the player didn't get, seriously injured or what have you. It was that crazy. Like, anyway, and they said connected to Rodney King. They had the audacity to say like crazy, and they said it was children. They said like 50%, roughly, approximately, of the children in the Dallas area did not attend school, so they said it was a lot of children who, skipped school and went to the parade and cut a fool, or literally cut a fool at the parade. Like, it is anyway. And if anything, that would be by Dallas. White people in Dallas, they can do a masterful job of making you forget anything. President was killed here? Really? When? Whew. They rioted after the Super Bowl? Really? Whew. Never even happened. Nobody even, and they'll have video footage. Really? That happened? Nobody even. The crazy thing is, I've heard people like talk about, not players, but like black people. Like, I was at that parade. I loved the Cowboys. That was the best time. I've heard black people talk about, they never said anything about, I was at, not the one where they rioted. They don't even say that. Not the one where I wasn't there for that one. But the one where they got the security. I was at that one. It was safe. We had a great time. I got pictures. We skipped school. Nothing. Amnesia is a bad thing. Widespread. We will do it up Thursday. Neutralizing Workplace Racism. 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Did ask our guest, do all white women practice white supremacy? He said yes. You can think about that. Is that true or not? Even before he tried to give that little tacky rejoinder, and he said, I know some white women who've done a lot to work against racism. I said, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wasn't the Carolyn Ryan Donna? You can vote for Obama. You can go out and do the roll around and ICE protest. You can do the No Kings protest and still practice racism. Yeah, you say, yeah. So let's get back to answering my question. So, do all white women practice? Yes, all white women. He could have said no. I was waiting on him to say no because I had my follow-up ready for that one too, but he didn't do this. Yes. What does it mean? Which, again, that would be the conclusion I would come to from reading his book. To be white, you practice racism. Duh. Looney Tunes. Even if you don't want to read this book, it would be worth it just to see some of those images at the beginning. Looney Tunes? Are you serious? Looney Tunes. And when that was one bit where I do think he was being truthful. He said, hey, white people, you can't be ignorant about what it means to be white. You are programmed 24/7. Looney Tunes, the Texas Ranger, even the Cowboy, all the sports names for the Texas teams, they all enforce racism. The Mavericks. That's like the rebel, see? And it's named after a slave-owning white man. I forgot, that is actually connected to a racist white man who was a slave owner in Texas. Maverick. And then the Cowboys, all of that is the whole racist legacy of white manifest destiny. And with the Texas Rangers, that's like lynching and killing non-white people. We had France Wendance Twine as a guest on the program. She talked about the Texas Rangers and different ways that white people memorialize Practicing White Supremacy, Racism, and she mentioned the Texas Rangers, but actually that was not France Wendance Twine, although she did talk about that specifically. That was Jacqueline Badalora the first time around, who talked about the Texas Rangers and how they have memorialized the team name White Supremacy. That's what the Texas Rangers were all about, lynching and killing non-white people, black males sometimes, so-called Mexicans other times, but non-white people. That was what they did, and now we will remember them forever with the baseball team. And that's what I mean. White culture, that's another one I should have added. White culture is practicing racism. You can't even get non-racist you can't even get non-racist names for your recreational clubs. Everything has got to go to what do we make the mascot? A racist, a slave owner. Yes. What else? What else is it going to be? Even Ole Miss, Johnny Red. What else is it going to be? What else is it going to be? And what's the biggest rivalry in there? Cowboys and Indians. What else is it going to be? Even Mr. Hunt, his son Lamar Hunt, took the team. They moved from Texas to Missouri. What'd I just say? Cowboys and Indians. What did he name the team? The Chiefs. System of White Supremacy. Ain't nobody ignorant, especially not white people, not even our guest. He said, I'm informed about racism. I'm about to write another book about racism, about eugenics. 8 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. We do not argue and tussle with people classified as black victims. If it's going to be an argument, it's going to be with someone classified as white. And we had an admitted racist on the program, so even better. Sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy, racism. We need high-functioning brain computers, especially if you're going to be talking with deceptive white people, so we can think, unravel their deception, confusion. It has been time, Creator, we ask that you remind us, stop saying not all white people are racist. But I know some white people, they've been real cool and they marched and they did the no kings. You and Mr. Phillips, stop saying not. And even notice when he did that, he pivoted and he said, I know some real cool white gals. They've done all kinds of amazing things and they've shouted and protested. And even one of them threw a bag of urine at a racist. He didn't say, no, not all white women are racist, Brother Gus. I know some cool white gals. He didn't do that. He didn't even answer the question and just immediately went to, I know some cool white gals. Get that white person to answer your question. Cool white gals notwithstanding. Cool white gals. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing. Oh my goodness, can I get in GTT? That's one that I did forget. I got my sundown towns. Edward Baptist, the half has never been told. Gone to Texas. He talks explicitly and extensively about this here region. He talked about scoundrel white people took their slaves, didn't pay their debts, and ran off to Texas. It was so widespread it got known as Gone to Texas. That's what I think about the scoundrel system of white supremacy, racism. We will close it. Tommy Lee Walker, James Lee Woodard, Lenel Jeter, who is still alive. He was not killed. He actually lectures on black self-respect. Married, privileged, black male, Lenel Jeter. System of White Supremacy. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.